Many of you already know that the TYT Army has been officially organizing for the past year, and the Army is constantly growing, too strong. They're making decisions on which candidates and elected officials to help, and always coming up with ways to inform people about progressive policies. Now, we want to give a huge shout out to some special volunteers and highlight accomplishments of our TYT Army. I love this story. One of our volunteers was watching the local news and saw two other volunteers that they don't know on TV. Now, how did they know who they were? Because they were supporting their TYT Army gear in support of protecting the environment. Check that out. Now, what I also love about this story is that the person who saw this took a screenshot and then posted it in the TYT Army chat room. You can imagine how excited they were to see this, and I couldn't be more proud of what they're doing to build the TYT Army. You too can get your TYT Army gear at tyt.com/shop, so we'll know when you're on the news. To learn more about the TYT Army and how you can help from home or even start your own team, head to tyt.com/army. Check your spam folder for lost emails to stay up to date with our events.
Okay, I get it. You're progressive. You're looking for other progressive voices. Why? Because you want real progress to happen. You're tired of the why, regular stuff. You should be checking out the Young Turks. Why? Because who else is going to have Killer Mike talking about politics and social issues in his new TV show, Trigger Warning?
Like all small businesses, we're struggling through this pandemic right now. We are doing a drive to keep TYT healthy. We want to be able to keep doing it, and it's been a Herculean task.
Ready for transport.
We're trying to raise $2 million overall, $200,000 a month if we can. If you can, and only if you can, tyt.com/go. Seriously, because we can't sustain this show without you. So thank you for making all this possible.
Where else can I feel as free as I do here to do what I do? And I wouldn't be able to do what I do if it weren't for all the people who have really carried us throughout the years.
You're our ultimate boss. We report to you guys, and if you don't like what we're doing on air or we're not telling the truth, boom, you fire us.
We're not the Young Turks, you're the Young Turks.
Keep TYT alive, healthy, wonderful, awesome, independent, progressive, keep it all those things. In fact, we have a new theme, Press On. Get it? It's a double meaning. tyt.com/go.
With Doe, you can turn your passions into potential investment opportunities. Whether it's cannabis, fashion, travel, video games, or anything in between, you tell them what you're interested in, and they'll help you uncover the investment potential. Doe provides your daily one-stop investment shop with lists of companies that relate to your personal interests, relevant news, and your favorite stocks and videos that unpack today's money-moving headlines in under 3 minutes. Go to doe.com/TYT.
Today, a terrible day for the internet, a terrible day for America. The internet as we know it is not going to exist anymore.
A real dark day for information, and yet another way that they're bleeding out the democracy.
We're now going to have these gatekeepers of information deciding what we can and can't see, and that's what scares me the most.
Whether you're conservative or progressive or anywhere in the middle, this is the one thing we should all agree to. Protect the internet, because the establishment is coming for it. Don't let them destroy the internet.
Hello and welcome. This is Staying Home with Josh Fox, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal and why we're not going back. On TYT, on Facebook, on the Gasland page, on the Josh Fox page, on the How to Let Go of the World and Love All the Things Climate Can't Change page, on the Climate Revolution page, also now on WBAI Radio in New York City. This is a program where we talk about a different aspect of the Green New Deal every single day. And the Green New Deal being a piece of legislation, being a resolution, but also being a world-changing, paradigm-shifting, future-altering type of ethos. So we can talk about it in so many different ways. We can talk about it as a piece of legislation. We can talk about it in technical terms. We can talk about it in emotional terms. We can talk about it in spiritual terms. And we do that on this program because it is as deep and intense and profound as talking about the future itself. If we do not transform our energy system away from fossil fuels and move away from emissions as a whole, we don't have a future on this planet. So the future is dependent on us embracing the principles inside the Green New Deal and working with the environmental movement. So today, my guests, I have some amazing, wonderful guests today. I have James Cromwell, Pramila Malik, and John Boutte. James Cromwell and Pramila Malik have been fighting against fracked gas in upstate New York, a fracked gas power plant for some time, and we're going to talk about their fight. I have John Boutte coming on, the great, legendary New Orleans singer, and the originator of the theme song of Treme, and he'll be on in the second half of the program. But I wanted to just start off by talking about one of the major principles of the Green New Deal is transforming our energy system away from fossil fuels and transforming it towards renewable energy. Okay, so that's absolutely fundamental to the conversation, right? What we don't realize in America is that we are actually in the process, started in the Obama administration, of transforming our energy system not to renewable energy, but to fracked gas. This is an enormous, huge problem. Now, this should be huge headline news, right? This should be like, oh, well, America transforms itself completely to the worst fossil fuel that we can possibly have on the planet if we're talking about climate change, right? Because we know that developing fracked gas puts so much methane and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and that creates a toxic mix of horrible proportions up in the atmosphere. Now, what we're doing, because of the Obama administration, essentially, is we're building 700 fracked gas infrastructure type facilities. Those are LNG terminals, those are power plants, those are pipelines. And these are some of the most toxic and polluting facilities because they create more fracking and they actually lock in fracking for 30 years or 40 years because you're now tied to that power because it's financed for all that time. The fight against these fracked gas power plants is the forefront of the climate movement, the forefront of the environmental movement right now. And it's happening from coast to coast. And one of the direst fights is in upstate New York, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. Also in the great city of New Orleans, where we have a fracked gas power plant being proposed for New Orleans East, which is a poor Black and Vietnamese neighborhood, which is a fracked gas power plant that is not needed in that city. So Food and Water Watch, in their groundbreaking report, which is called The Fracking Endgame, talks about this 700 different facility future as a future that will be mired in plastics, pollution, fracking, and chaos. So it is extremely important that we support the fights against these fracked gas power plants all across the nation. Not just the pipelines, not just the fracking itself, but the place where the end of this fracked gas is going, which are these totally needless power plants, which we should be building solar and wind for instead. Or efficiency and conservation and all the ways in which we deal with what we know is in the Green New Deal. So it is with great pleasure that I welcome my two friends, Pramila Malik and James Cromwell. Hi, it's great to see you guys. How are you?
Fine, thanks.
Hey Josh, how are you?
I'm good. Normally when we talk, you guys are in the same place, but circumstances are so different now, huh?
Yeah, they are indeed.
But the fight continues on. Let me just frame this and say, your fight against the CPV power plant, which I think stands for Corporate Power Ventures. I think we were calling them corporate power vultures. In upstate New York, in Wayanda, New York, which is about an hour and a half from New York City, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Has been going on. This has been going on for more than 5 years.
It's actually been going on since 2011, Josh.
Wow.
So
the stamina and the endurance that you guys have. And I know I've popped in from time to time to do an event here and there, to do a screening of a movie, to do a talk or whatever, in support. And that movement is strong. But you guys, let me just say, my hat's off to you, because you have been doing this for such a long time. And it's really kind of shocking and remarkable to me, the level of hypocrisy. Because in New York State, we banned fracking, which was brilliant, amazing, extremely important. And you guys were both involved in that fight. But New York State continues to import fracked gas from other states, including Pennsylvania, for things like this. Tell us a bit about your fight, about what this CPV power plant is, and give us the basic framework of it.
Go ahead, Pramila.
Oh, okay. I'll go. So CPV, it's actually Competitive Power Ventures.
Oh, Competitive Power
You're
Ventures.
right. We refer to them as corrupt power vultures. It's a power plant that is built to plug New York City, which is the second largest consumer of power in the entire world, to fracked gas dependency for the next 40 years. And we all know what that means for the climate. It means, game over for the climate. Yeah. So this is why we continue to do this, because we understand this is an existential threat. This power plant must be shut down. But this company doesn't just build them here. They're actually building them to serve every major metropolitan region, I think, in the entire country. So wow. Chicago, the Washington, D.C. area. They've already built one for the L.A. area. They build them all around the country. And you're right, it's a problem.
Well, I say this all the time. We have 700 frack gas facilities that are supposed to come online. And the history of this is because the Obama administration created what was called the Clean Power Plan. The Clean Power Plan was actually not clean at all. It was phasing out coal, which was a good thing, but it was ushering in gas instead of ushering in renewable energy. Now, I say all the time, we can either have the 700 frack gas power plants or the future. We can't have both. And so this fight is so incredibly important. James, tell me, how did you get involved with this, and where is this for you right now?
Well, I came to it late, much later than Pramila, and there was already an organization, the organization that she founded, which Protect Orange County.
I should say that Protect Orange County, Pramila Malik, one of the founders.
Yeah, and they were already involved. They had done a lot of work, and they were picketing, and they marched, and they'd done a lot of things. And I came in and sort of hoped that, that's the thing about celebrity. It tends to draw attention, and I sort of become a mouthpiece, but I always refer to Pramila because Pramila knows a great deal more than I do. And I got involved, and we did the things. I thought, well, it's an organization, and it has as you've explained, it's fairly straightforward, and I don't know how anybody can miss what the equation is, what the choices are, whether we're going to have a livable life or we're going to be inundated not only by these viruses, but by the air pollution and everything that's in the pollution, and its effect mostly on people of color in these environmental justice communities, which was, of course, where they placed the plant. So I got involved, and I think we did almost everything that is possible to do to try to get attention to this, what I consider to be a betrayal by the movement we were a sacrificed community.
Yeah.
The movement got what it wanted, which was this moratorium. I don't like calling it a ban, a moratorium on fracking. And I think there was a quid pro quo, because it's the way you have to deal with the power structure. There has to be a give and take. You want access. To have access, you have to have a certain amount of clout, power. And then you get access, and then you make a deal. And I think the deal was, listen, the governor says, I want to close down Indian Point. I want to, I'd like to accommodate you with a moratorium. I can't give you a ban. What do I get out of it? Because what I want is, I want a frack gas fired power plant to be the backup to New York City so that I can shut down Indian Point. And I think I started to notice how this.
So this becomes one environmental movement pitted up against another one, right? Because obviously, and this is a false dichotomy, right? We don't want Indian Point, clearly. We don't want a nuclear power plant, 90 minutes away from New York City. But we also don't want fracked gas, because that means also curtains for the climate and curtains for the environment. And we are often pushing to this position where, out of either weakness or being sold out by lobbyists or whatever, there is a problem that happens. And then this is the problem. This is not just happening here, though. This is happening all across the nation. They're pushing fracked gas as some kind of crazy environmental alternative, as if gas was somehow better. But we know that it's not. But James, I gotta say, I share your ire and I share your frustration with the big greens. When I first started making Gasland, these people did not want to hear from me. They thought gas was great. They were told all their time that gas was great. I sat down with Michael Brun of the Sierra Club. I sat down with NRDC. And time after time after time, there were deals made, exactly as you say, whether that was in Illinois or wherever, that cut out the true people's movement. And this is why the work that you're doing is so incredibly important, at the forefront of these, and that it has to be called out, as you say. Pramila, tell us more about the environmental impacts and the environmental effects of the emissions. You're watching Staying Home with Josh Fox, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. Pramila, tell us about what the health effects of these plants do to people.
Well, I mean, the health effects are manifesting on the bodies of our children. We have children getting nosebleeds, headaches, and rashes. We have children who can't sleep at night. I get calls about noxious odors, sometimes in the middle of the night. But, our governor, who says every life matters, who says that, nobody will be sacrificed, that no life is expendable, literally appropriates every word we've ever said in our 10-year fight. It doesn't, they just sweep it under the rug. The media won't acknowledge it. I want to remind everybody that this is a power plant in which the governor's closest aide, Joseph Percoco, was found guilty and is now serving time, ironically, in Orange County for taking bribery money from this company, from CPV, nearly $300,000.
So the man who helped architect this plant, this plan, is now in jail.
He's in jail. The company executive was in jail. Now, here's the irony. The company executive got like 18 months, whereas Joseph Percoco got 6 years. But it was really the company that kind of created this whole corruption scheme. And by the way, they do this in every state that they go to. So, they actually had California's air quality standards diminished to allow for their power plant in the Coachella Valley to serve LA. So this is how this company operates, and what it tells us that the real cause of the climate crisis, like we blame CO2 and we blame methane, and human beings have an amazing capacity to scapegoat, but corruption is the cause of the climate crisis, and the corruption that we allow in this country, that we turn a blind eye to. I mean, I
also don't think that people know. I think, honestly, because we don't have the media reporting on this, right? Remember, because I know the difference. I know because when I came out with this expose on fracking, and we were lighting water on fire, right? And it was on HBO. It was this big thing against fracking. And then all of a sudden, this part got left out of the equation. And we didn't start to get on the media anymore, right? Because we started, when I started to support Bernie Sanders in 2016, I was just put off of television completely, right? I could not get this message out because I have been screaming and yelling about this. In fact, during the 2016 presidential race, in the presidential platform, I got an amendment passed alongside of Bill McKibben and Dr. Cornel West and others, but I authored it to stop fracked gas power plants 4 years ago. And it's in the Democratic platform, right?
I was there at the time, Josh, when at the platform committee meeting.
Right. And that was a huge priority because this is the forefront of fracking, ladies and gentlemen. If you're against fracking, you must start to get involved in the fight against the power plants. The power plants are such a bigger deal than the individual fracking wells and the individual fracking fields. Because without that place where they're burning the gas, what do they do with it? There's nothing to do with it. You build a frack gas power plant instead of building a solar panel, instead of building a windmill. But you know, why do you think, and you're saying corruption, the Cuomo administration has been actually really favorable to the environmental movement in a lot of cases. They just said no to the Williams pipeline, which was a pipeline that was being fought for years. There is this moratorium on actual fracking. The NED pipeline was shut down. The Constitution pipeline shut down. So there has been a lot of sensitivity. Why do you think this project didn't also get shut down?
Because it's the one the industry needed more than anything else. New York City is the second largest consumer of power in the entire world. So imagine what a massive market that is for the industry. And the entire industry, if you read industry reports, if you read Natural Gas Daily or Shale Insight, they're all, they were celebrating when the Valley Lateral Pipeline was approved. They were celebrating when CPV became operational. They're celebrating now that Cricket Valley was just approved. By the way,
what is Cricket Valley?
Cricket Valley is the second power plant in Dutchess County, which is larger than CPV. So the two power plants, CPV and Cricket Valley, were planned together to be the replacement power for Indian Point. And Cricket Valley just became operational literally days before IP2 was shut down. And NISO, everybody was, celebrating and saying, now we have reliable baseload power to serve New York City. And the truth of the matter is they do. And we saw immediately after that shutdown, we saw gas consumption by fuel, energy generation by fuel increasing for gas and oil in New York State. We watched the NISO dashboard literally daily to monitor that. And so there's been about a 15 to 20% increase in our gas consumption. And CPV is going to increase our greenhouse gas emissions by 10%. Cricket Valley 10%. By 10%, and Cricket Valley by 15%. So we're talking about
for the New York State emissions.
All of New York from the power sector, all of the emissions from the power sector, 10% for CPV, 15% for Cricket Valley. We're talking about a 25% increase in greenhouse gas emissions when we all know we have an uncontrollable climate crisis on our hands. Everyone acknowledges it's an existential threat, but the policies don't match the rhetoric. And again, you see it's because of corruption and it's because of deception. And what I always say is that climate truth, climate reality is the crack between denial and deception. So on the right, you have denial, climate denialism by like the Trump administration, but on the left with Obama, with Cuomo, with the neoliberal Democratic establishment, you have climate deception. So they talk the talk, but their policies don't match the rhetoric.
You're watching Staying Home with Josh Fox, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. My guests are James Cromwell and Pramila Malik. James Cromwell, a wonderful and amazing actor, but also an incredible activist and a person who's been crusading on the climate campaign against fracking for a very, very long time. And Pramila Malik, the founder, co-founder, I think, of Protect Orange County and Principled Progressives. James, you have been so involved in so many different types of movements and struggles. Tell me about because the last time we were together, I think we were dealing with, we were doing a talkback from my film, and you talked about the Black Panthers, and you talked about the intersectionality of these struggles and how you got involved with this decades and decades and decades ago. Tell us a little bit about that history, because I think it's something that people don't really know much about.
There has been, since the beginning of this country, an effort to bring the justice and democracy that people fought and died for to the people. This is supposed to be a government of, by, and for the people, and it never has been. It was co-opted by the rich and the powerful from the very beginning. Those discrepancies were embedded in the Constitution, which is why we struggle with it. Which is why we have an ineffective system. This system is not working. In fact, none of the systems are working. Our healthcare system is not working, our education system, our transportation system, everything is failing. So what I feel is there has been a movement from, as I say, from the very beginning, and I happened to come to it in the 60s, which is the sort of the hiss, the wave, the small wave that telegraphs a larger wave coming behind of a flood, that flood being a paradigm shift. What I'm interested in is, which way is the shift going to go? Because in situations like we have now, with the failure of all institutions and systems of government, and climate change and these pandemics, supposedly, and the causes for them, we have a choice. In the past, this has led often to fascistic, to authoritarian changes, as they impose greater and greater restrictions on our personal freedom, more and more control on what is truth is disseminated, and a sense of repression of what the truth is and what we can do to have the world that we want to live in. Or we can have a paradigm shift in which we reconnect. The indigenous leaders say we have lost touch with the spirit. We have also, I just listened to an incredible talk by a wonderful doctor in Hawaii named Zach Bush, and an examination of the coronavirus, the deception, the confusion, the ineptitude around this pandemic, which is the virus. He says, the virus is not killing us. The plague on this planet is us. We have divorced ourselves from the genome, from the biosphere. We are at antagonism with the natural environment, and the natural environment is doing what it always does. It is modifying and adapting, and we happen to be the recipients of it. So all I'm saying is what I am saying, not all I'm saying. What I'm saying is it's really important. We have to take this back. There are various ways to do it. I have a few ideas, but many, many smarter people have a better idea. To take this country back and to change these institutions, principally our economic system, which is capitalism, which is driving CPV, which is driving the extraction industries, which is driving the medical establishment. I personally cannot fathom how. I think I told you when I wrote you back, Einstein said you can't solve a problem using the same mind that created the problem. The mind that created this problem is capitalism, is paternalism, is repression, is the use of power, is the divorcement and the destruction of our natural environment. This is change people's minds and people's hearts.
Well, I think that's what we're trying to forge on this program, is a dialogue about these issues, right? Because what we're saying, what the issue here is that something like a Green New Deal, which is a socialist program in my view, because it costs $17 trillion. And I have campaigned for renewable energy from coast to coast, and I don't find that renewable energy and capitalism go very well together because it's a different type of model than extractive and commodity-based fuel, right? So what I'm saying is the Green New Deal is a fundamental reaction response to the coronavirus, because the fossil fuel industry is a global pandemic. As Pramila mentioned, the health effects are killing our children. The fossil fuel industry kills 5 to 7 million people a year just from air pollution. which is what you're talking about when we're talking about these frack gas power plants.
Right.
So in our last moment, so we have to actually change the systems, both, and oil and capitalism, oil and gas. Oil is the blood of capitalism, in my view.
And
So
capitalism is cancer.
yeah, and so you're absolutely right. We're talking about a sea change. We're talking about renewable energy. We're talking about 50% of the streets in our cities free of cars, right? For alternative methods of transportation. We're talking about a healthier way of looking at life, all life. And yes, we are seeing the ways in which the natural world is striking back at us. Pramila, in our last moment here, before we have to end, tell us how now we can support. How can we get involved? How can we be a part of what you're doing? How can we bind these struggles together? Because they are happening in so many places across the United States.
I mean, for CPV itself, the pressure has to go to Cuomo. He's the ultimate decision maker, and he's somebody who clearly has presidential ambitions. So, tweet at Governor Cuomo that, hashtag what about us, that we matter. That this is a plant hashtag built on bribes. So, you can get all of that from protectorangecounty.org's website, and you can also sign our petition. But in terms of the larger issue, we have to understand that climate policy is actually energy policy. That's something we don't focus on our energy state's energy policy. In 2015, the United States began producing more power from gas, fracked gas, than any other source of power. We're not building the renewable power at the rate and scale and magnitude that we actually need to. And we also have to start investing in research and technology to develop the solutions for tomorrow. But in terms of right now, we're putting the cart before the horse. For our energy policy, we should be shutting down energy generators in order of their carbon and global warming impact. Mm-hmm. And that means frack gas has to be the first thing to go.
I agree.
And then you build up renewables in accordance with that. If you shut down a nuclear power plant, which is essentially carbon free, and you haven't built the replacement renewable power, you're basically just opening the market for gas. I mean, the same thing with coal. If you shut down a coal plant and you haven't built renewable replacement power, you're basically giving a market to gas. So we're not doing things in the right order. The sequence matters. And then, as Jamie said, we have to look at all of the tools that oligarchs use, like the media. You mentioned the media. I sat next to the New York Times reporter every day during the Percoco trial. And even though CPV and their plant was mentioned at least 24 times a day during that trial, that reporter never covered the power plant and the project at the center of that corruption scandal, even though I gave him every single fact he needed to know. They weren't interested, and obviously they were told from the very top not to write about that project. So, I mean, this is what we're dealing with: corrupt media. The courts are not necessarily beyond influence as well. We have systemic corruption, and we do need a revolution. I'm really disappointed that Bernie didn't, win, and I think we should, my appeal to Bernie Sanders is, please, Bernie, come back. Bernie, come back. Because the climate, our children, they don't have a chance without him. There's nobody else.
All right. Thank you, Pramila. So listen, what I'm trying to do here is be the media. We've always had to be the media ourselves. We're on TYT. We're out all over the place. Please share the program. Please keep watching. I want to just thank you both for the incredible hard work that you're doing and for the perspective that you've shared tonight. And we will please go and support Protect Orange County, Stop CPV. Tell the website one more time, and then we have to go to a break.
protectorangecounty.org.
Okay. Thanks, you guys. I'll see you again down the trail, and deeply appreciate what you have to say. All right.
Thanks, man.
Take care.
You're watching Staying Home with Josh Fox, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. So listen, here's what you have to understand. Fracked gas is the worst possible fuel that we can develop if we want to stop climate change. because you leak all this methane into the atmosphere, which is 100 times more potent than carbon dioxide is in the short term as a heating agent, and all this carbon dioxide. That goes up into the air. So when you build a frack gas power plant, you're actually creating the worst possible thing for climate change. We have to end these frack gas power plants. There is so much, as Pramila said, corruption, there's money changing hands, there's backroom deals. I've seen this happen from New Orleans to California to New York. We have to rise up and stop this. So, going to New Orleans, my next guest, one of my most absolute favorite performers on the planet, and an incredible mind and spirit and musical force, John Boutte. John, are you with us?
Welcome, everybody. That's a painting from my dear friend Paul Borello. He painted that back in the late '80s, man. And actually, that's Paul, the clarinet player. And
for those of you listening to us on the radio, it's a beautiful painting of all these different musicians in the height of a jam. And if you want to see it, you got to watch us on TYT. John,
yeah.
How are you?
I'm as well as I can be under the circumstances, Josh.
That's good.
Yeah, I'm doing good, man. Compared to a lot of people, I'm doing very well.
You have a song that I feel like I requested psychically of you, and you just responded, because it feels like what it is right now, and it's called The Eternal Now.
Yes.
Because it does feel a little like Groundhog's Day, right?
Doesn't it feel that way, right? It does have that essence, man. But, it is like the eternal now. All we have is now. The past is gone, man. It's always now. We can't get away from that. So we have to do things now. We have to be in the moment. Yeah. And we have to act in the moment, because if we don't, we could be lost.
That's what nature teaches us. And I'm out in the middle of the woods in Pennsylvania, and I watch the beavers, and I watch the robins, and I watch the rabbits, the cottontail rabbits, and the deer, and I watched the porcupine was eating my front porch the other night. They're not sitting around neurotically going, what should I do now? They're doing their thing. They just do their thing. They want to turn right, they turn right. They want to turn left, they turn left. They're in the moment. They're in the now. And we're so challenged to be in that moment right now, because we know, I feel like a revolutionary consciousness is trying to get born, and it has to get born faster than this authoritarianism that we're seeing cropping up all over the place. And it is that confrontation that we're in, but it feels like thoughts are very vivid and very alive right now. You feel that way?
I do feel that way. I just, I also feel very lonely sometimes too here, man. In the moment, I feel, I just want to be able to go out and hug my family and touch my friends, man.
I know.
Just when is that going to be? That's real torture for Homo sapiens, man. We need each other.
I know.
We might not like each other, but we need each other, man. I'm serious.
And an audience, a live audience. This is the best we can do right now.
Yes. Right? A live audience, man. I was sitting there thinking today, just the joy I get sometimes, my own pleasure of being on stage, because people say, oh, you're giving us so much, but they don't realize I'm just working out all my demons on that stage too. So I come out just as refreshed as everybody else,
Yeah.
And I'm missing that. I really am missing that, man.
Me too. I'm losing it. Well, before we babble away all of our time, let's do The Eternal Now, which is a new rendition with the piano.
That's right. Let's see if I can do it, because I just forgot the key I tried it in. We are living the eternal now. Oh, the past is gone, the future is tomorrow. And a baby laughs, and old folks slow down. Maybe the moment is talking to you now. We are hanging from a silver string, know where each moment is. Yes, it's a precious thing. The April rain, leaves fall down. Maybe the moment is talking to you now. Well, are you alive? at this very moment. Are you alive? Can you feel it in your soul? Are you alive? Let your heart beat with mine and jump into the river. Jump into the river of time. 'Cause we are living eternal now. The past is gone, and the future is tomorrow. A baby laughs, and old folks slow down. Maybe the moment is talking to you right now. Yeah.
Every time I hear you, I am in the moment and I am alive at that moment. That you bring such life and such joy. Listen, people, check out John Boutte on Spotify. Where else can we see you? When can you find all that music?
Well, you know what, Josh? This is a crazy thing, man. There's right now CD Baby, which distributes all my records. Not only did I miss French Quarter Fest, Jazz Fest, several private parties, canceled my entire European tours, but the other day I woke up and found out that they weren't selling my CDs on CD Baby because the warehouse is closed down. So I'm like, oh my goodness, man. But you know what? Guess what? It's only money, and you can't eat money. You know what I'm saying? I don't care about that, man. I want to be able to breathe. I want to be able to go outside of my house and not choke to death on fossil fuels.
Yeah.
You know?
That's what this program is about. We're talking about stopping that power plant in New Orleans East, the frack gas power plant. We got to stop that gas plant. We talked about it earlier on the program today about a gas plant here in New York State. These fights bind us together.
Well, Josh, I can tell you a couple of years back, I did a lot of traveling, and then I started again. I stopped, and I started traveling again about 5-6 years back. And as I flew over the States and I looked out the window and I was looking at these squares, right? I'm like, what is that? What is that? What is everywhere? And it's the fracking.
I know.
It's
in my movie.
Man.
I know,
and
it's in my film. I stare out the window in the film, Gasland Part 2 and Gasland Part 1, and you see it all out there in front of you. It looks like alien landing strips.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. But here's the thing: where I'm living now, they're about to frack, right? But guess what? They didn't. You know. But this is
because we stopped them.
Well, now here's another thing. All the people, I'm not gonna say who they are, but they like to wear red. All the people in North Shore, the red folks, they were pulling their hair out when they thought the fracking was going to come in their backyard and mess with their water wells.
Right.
They stopped it. Thank goodness they didn't decide to put it in the 7th Ward in New Orleans. They just said, okay, no problem.
Well, we're talking about the deep legacy of environmental racism that we see playing out in Cancer Alley and playing out in New Orleans East. And we were just talking about it here in upstate New York as well. And this is the hypocrisy of this moment. And that's why we got to fight for the Green New Deal. And John, you never hold back your political comments.
Yes.
Even when you're playing in the French Quarter or on Jazz Fest. Right. Does this ever get you in trouble down, with sponsors, which is Shell, Chevron, French Quarter Fest?
You know what? I don't care what I'm going to tell you like Ernie Cato said. I don't care. You know what they think. You know what? I'm going to say what I have to say. And people always tell me, man, just shut up and sing. And I'm like, really? You just stay home. Or you got to be crazy, man. This is my bully platform. This is where I have a voice. This is where I can tell people, I can speak my truth to power. And so I do. I know a lot of people tell me I shouldn't. That's why I don't have any management. I'm my management because I can't have somebody telling me what I can say. I'm not going to have anybody editing what comes across out of my mouth on the stage. This is my turn to burn, and I'm gonna speak truth when I'm up there. That's the best I can do. Which I got to just say this, Josh. I have an underlying problem. I have asthma, right, as a kid. And that asthma was a result of the federal government. There's no doubt in my mind. My asthma occurred because the federal government tore down all those trees when I was 8 years old on Claiborne Avenue, and all the particulates that came from that massive operation. I'm one city block away. The black folks. That used to be a Creole. That was economic engine, man. Just go look back and see they had everything. They broke that up, and not only did they break it up, they poisoned it. Because after the bridge was up, we got nothing but lead, and that's why these kids have running problems and everything else. I guarantee you, man. So yeah, I'm pissed. I can say pissed, right?
I think so.
You know, I like to curse.
Well, we're not allowed to curse on the program anymore.
Not allowed to curse, but you can.
I like to
read
curse
my mind.
also, John.
Y'all can read my mind.
Listen, we're building a revolutionary consciousness. Your music, the things you have to say. Thank you so much for being with us when we're doing that, right? Thank you so much for showing us how the music is connected to politics, and how the issues of racial segregation and racial discrimination are connected to the environment. That's what we all have to understand.
Right, man. You know, let me tell you, this pandemic has raised up America's skirt, and it don't look pretty. You know, it doesn't look pretty at all, because a lot of people, it's the poor folks, man. And guess what? I asked a question on Facebook the other day. I usually don't have, I never kind of like pass on these things, right? But somebody asked, am I going out? Or you know, because they lifted the restrictions yesterday. So everybody said, are you going out? There's not one person out of the 5,000 friends I have and everybody else, not one person said that they were going out. So what are they going to do when poor people don't decide to die for the almighty dollar, right? What are they going to do? They're going to bring out the military to force us to work?
Well,
You know?
guess what, John? This program is called Staying Home. And the reason why is because staying home is a revolutionary act. We are not going out into the disease just because they're saying it's all okay. Don't worry about it, because we know that the fossil fuel industry kills us, and that's okay with them. We know that pharmaceutical industry kills us, and that's okay with them. We know that we have to ration insulin, and that's okay with them. Our deaths have always been okay with them, but it can't be okay with us. So we gotta organize, we gotta mobilize, and we gotta stay home. We gotta leave it there. I want to say thank you, John Boutte, for being with us. For both of us, John and Josh, stay home, stay revolutionary, stay innovating, stay perseverant, stay on it, stay green, and stay healthy.
Stay well and be well too, baby.
Are you a politician with a ridiculous point to make? Are you in need of a petulant, outdated way to make it? Then you'll need one of my signs. Hi, I'm Simon Simonson of Simonson Signs. We'll take the stupid, over-the-top, meaningless allegory you have and put it on foam core. So maybe someone will notice your grandstanding, because this is C-SPAN, and anything that's not people milling around in front of a running vote count is almost considered moderately entertaining. The bar is low, just like our prices. We've got plenty of designs. We also brought you Mike Lee's Tauntauns. They're tons of fun. What does this have to do with the Green New Deal? About as much as this other visual aid he used of Reagan on a T-Rex. Or is that a Velociraptor? Who cares? Who the cares? No one gives a. Call us now at Simon Simonson Signs. We'll make your stupid point stupidly for money today.
Viewers had asked for an interview with the TYT Lizard. Mr. Lizard. Oh, you changed colors today. Nice. I don't even know how you feel about us. Do you even like us?
Well, you guys made me this awesome house, so I'm kind of in your debt. I was found outside on the street, and you gave me a home. Granted, it was a really crappy home for a while, but But then through the power of fundraising, I became a person who has a multi-level Trump-style mansion.
You do. By the way, you've never looked better, man. Normally, you're just green or just brown, but today you're in mid-lizard, right?
I'm not very smart. I'm a lizard, so I don't know how the science works. I guess this is just my mood. It's not every day that thresholds like this are broken. I'm just so excited. I can't contain my pigmentation.
And now you're showing it off.
Yep.
Yeah, I've never seen the lizard like this before.
You want to know how you could save money and save the planet? Hello, I got an awesome option for you guys. Aspiration.com/TYT. You plant not 1, not 5, 10 trees when you sign up. You know what trees do? Not a big deal, but one large tree can provide a day's supply of oxygen for up to 4 people. That's 40 people's oxygen just by signing up at aspiration.com/TYT. Sign up for a free spend and save account right now at aspiration.com/TYT.
That 300 million is a pretty good number. We were doing a press release on it, and I got all worked up. And I said, okay, well, that's the size of the U.S. population. You know what our next target is? The size of the entire world on the road to 6 billion. Although by the time we hit it, it'll probably be 7, maybe 8 billion.
Not a big deal. A couple of days ago on the TYT network, we passed 1 billion views.
What the hell?
What the hell?
That's a big freaking deal.
2 billion views.
What now?
Sorry.
What did we do? 2 billion?
2 billion.
They said it couldn't be done, but it was done.
We just crossed 5 billion views on YouTube.
I mean, imagine 10 years ago thinking, one day.
We looked at you like, are you nuts? Young Turks crosses 6 billion views. Young Turks has just passed another milestone, 10 billion views.
Damn.
Guys, as we're all home, we're using the internet way more. You need your internet protected. You don't want prying eyes in there. No hackers. Dun, 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 dun. They're there. Actually, they're now more active than ever. So make sure you got a VPN. NordVPN has been with the Young Turks for a long time. They're one of the best services available. So NordVPN.com/TYT, and you get a free month extra. Plus, you get 70% off of a 3-year plan. NordVPN.com/TYT. All right, welcome to the conversation on the TYT network. We have a really interesting guest for you guys tonight. Theo Henderson is the creator and host of We the Unhoused podcast. He has actually a really interesting idea about what hotels can do during the coronavirus to really help. But of course, both the hotels and the government have chosen not to do that. We'll get to that in a second. But Theo, welcome to the show. And you're in a unique situation because you do a podcast about the homeless or the unhoused, but you yourself are also unhoused. Is that correct?
That is correct. That was one of the genesis of why I felt it was important, because many people are talking about the unhoused crisis or houseless crisis or homeless crisis, but they rarely are asking unhoused people their opinion on the solutions that are part of their lives. So it's just like a dentist telling or making a root canal on the wrong tooth, and you keep telling them this tooth on my wisdom tooth needs to be extracted, and they are taking out your front teeth. So that's primarily the reason why I'm doing what I do.
Yeah, by the way, that literally happened to me. So I know the feeling. Okay, so Theo, for folks who aren't familiar, I think that they have this issue that the homeless feel like the others, and now there's this assumption, they must have either a drug addiction problem or some mental health issues. In some of the cases, that's true, but actually in places like LA where you are, that's actually a minority of the unhoused. So as an example, Theo, how did you become unhoused?
That's excellently put. 60,000 unhoused people are not mentally ill and drug addict. And prior to this, and I always tell people this because I did not just one day decide, this is going to be excellent living to live out on the street. I had a life. I'm a college educated man, and I was a teacher. And I was teaching around the Great Recession, and I became ill. I went into a diabetic coma. And I was a battle between me staying in my place and healing, because as you know, insurance at the time, pre-Obamacare, was not always the most least inexpensive. So that ended up a downward spiral. I had lost my place. I started staying with friends, the kind-hearted friends, and then that became difficult because they were going through their own financial struggles. Then I would try to make my money stretched and go to those seedy hotels, and then that money ran out until I finally hit the streets. And this story is not an anomaly. My podcast highlights a lot of stories where people were living life. And for example, one of my guests became unhoused in the apartment that he used to be a landlord to after his wife died. So these stories are very commonplace. The exception is always the stories that the police and business improvement district employees push out, that unhoused people are criminals.
Yeah, so real quick, Theo, was it any of the medical bills that was an issue for you?
Medical bills, and not only that, to be clearer, it was medicine. I needed money to pay for my medicine, and before I was not on Medicare. I was a working person, and you don't qualify for Medicare if you're employed. At the time, I had to pay for the medicine or pay my rent, and of course, I'm going to survive. And what good is paying the rent if I drop dead? So I had to make some hard decisions.
This country's brutal, man. So now, as you say, you're college educated, et cetera. So you're savvy enough to be able to do a podcast under any circumstance, obviously. But it's got to be challenging when you don't have a house. So how in the world did you put together a podcast?
Well, it is a Herculean task, I can tell you. It is, and to be clear, people have always running around when they hear me say it, well, why don't you get a job? And I says, doing a podcast is like your show is a job. I found the solution in doing it by my phone. I interview people from my phone. I go to encampments. I go to wherever overpasses, way out in the thicket of places, and I interview unhoused people where they're at. And that's basically the long and short of it. I don't have the fanciest studio equipment, so you're going to hear noises or police sirens or the things like that. But I also want to educate the populace. That's what their lifestyle is. We are guests in their home. It's not the other way around. So,
yeah. Look, I'll recommend your podcast. It's called We the On House, and I'll tell you why. When I briefly ran for Congress, it gave me an opportunity to spend a lot more time talking to homeless folks up in Lancaster, Palmdale, and other places. And almost everything you hear is a misconception. If you bother to talk to folks for a couple of minutes, or if you're still worried about that because of the things that you've heard, at least hear Theo talking to them. Okay. And you're going to be shocked to find out their stories. And at the end of the day, you know what you're going to think? Oh, they're just like me, but they ran into some trouble. Okay. Yes. And so that's especially in LA, that's the majority of cases.
And I also want to add to what people fail to realize. COVID-19 has released, the LA Times talks about 45% of people that are caught into the COVID-19 losing their jobs and living in these places, they will be joining the unhoused ranks soon because of the financial difficulties that's going to bring about afterwards. Even though we are going back, releasing the shelter-in-place orders, people are still losing their jobs. People are going to be paying back rent that can't pay back rent, and people are still going to be trying to survive in this type of new normal, if that's such a word. So the unhoused crisis is going to be much more closer than they realize.
So that's right. So now, Theo, you have an interesting idea about the coronavirus situation. So what do you think the hotel should be doing right now?
The hotels right now should have been doing this a long time ago. We have two pandemics. We have COVID-19 and we have the war on the poor. And what the project hotel house key idea was, a coalition of house and activists got together all over California to put the fire to the feet of the mayor and the governor to start commandeering more hotels. What we got was a lackluster response. The Los Angeles Times released another report saying most of those hotels that they were commandeering and making these deals with are empty. So this is reminiscent to the Olympics of 1984. 2028 is coming up, and the criminalization and punitive measures of the unhoused is still in sync. There is no compassion. There's no humanity. It's only political compassion.
Yeah. So look, I'm not at all surprised the hotels don't want to do it. And so do you think the government should force them to do it? And do they have the authority to do that at the state level?
Yes, they do. And yes, they should. It is amazing to me, and I don't know if you're familiar with some of the ordinances and laws on the books. Look at the speed that it takes for them to penalize and criminalize unhoused. And look at the reluctance for them to exact the same speed when it comes to pushing our citizens to care about people that are in vulnerable and impoverished conditions. They drag their feet. They're begging them to have a heart. They're, or they're just basically tone deaf, or they're using terms like political compassion, or these ridiculous things where it should have been like, okay, we've given you billions of dollars of tax money. It is time for you to step up and become much more concerned about your fellow man instead about your spreadsheet. Because you could always rebuild a building. You could always renovate a house or room. But we cannot do is always save a life if someone is in great need from health issues, or you don't have to have health issues. Housing is a human right, and it should be in this country.
Good luck to you, brother. Literally, right? I think it's amazing that you're doing that program, and I think that you're going to need a lot of luck to convince politicians who take money from big money interests like probably hotels. But what you're saying is logical. There's no question that the hotels have rooms now. There's no question at all. And I've read the stories about in Nevada, Las Vegas particularly, people living out in the desert in the most, in the hardest situations you can imagine, especially some that are getting sick because of coronavirus. Meanwhile, you got thousands upon thousands of available hotel rooms sitting completely empty. So, man, unfortunately, it is some sign of the capitalist, country that we live in, and it's not a pretty picture. And certainly the runaway, outrageous form of capitalism that we're doing this day and age in America. All right, and so Theo, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. Everybody check out We the Unhoused. And if you like what Theo's saying about the movement on hotels, please join. Okay?
Yes. And No Vacancies is the movement that we are part of.
Theo, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
I'm here today to announce the program known as DACA is being rescinded.
We don't run our own country. We've lost our democracy, and all we have left is rage.
Where are the Democrats? I would be on every cable news channel screaming and yelling and talking about what the Republicans are doing right now.
How do you expect us to get excited to show up to the polls for these loser Democrats? How come we have nothing but cowards who'll never fight? Primaries are everything.
Building a great wall on the southern border.
You have politicians who fearmonger about disenfranchised groups.
The first attacker came through the visa lottery.
Now they are against legal immigrants.
Ending chain migration.
They don't want people from those countries coming here because they're fucking racist. This guy's an absolute monumental disgrace to all of us as Americans.
I ordered to launch precision strikes on targets.
That is what I was warning about for literally years on this program. This is what they promised they would do if they got into power, and what do you know? They did it.
I've now shown dozens of videos on the Young Turks of cops handcuffing people who are bleeding to death. His life means nothing. We have been trained to be cowards, so we're gonna handcuff that guy bleeding to death.
What does this law mean? These are all just basic BS coverings.
To every politician who is taking donations from the NRA, shame on you.
They said that this was impossible, but now we're beginning to move that boulder. And at the end, we'll get our democracy back. Primary the living hell out of these Democrats, and let's take over the party. That's a ghost ship. Let's board it, and let's take it.
I've been a fan of TYT, I believe, for the last 6 years.
5 years.
3 years now. 7 years.
4 years now.
2.5 years. I just started because she got me into it.
My boyfriend actually watches it every morning and every night, so I kind of just started watching it with him, and I love it. I mean, it's the only way that I find my news.
Looking through YouTube, looking for political shows that look cool.
I came across a very angry rant from Cenk, and that's when I knew.
So I was immediately in love with the show.
And then I haven't missed a live show since then.
10 times a day, I watched the show in the morning.
Whenever I had a bad day at high school, Young Turks.
Man, Cenk is just so blunt and honest, and I love the honesty, and there's no BS behind the news, and they just tell everything like it is.
There's nobody censoring them. There's nobody there to say you can't do this, you can't say that.
That feel of authenticity makes it seem like what they're saying is true.
I feel like I get the real story from the Young Turks.
I am TYT.
I am TYT.
I am TYT.
I am TYT. I am TYT.
I am TYT.
Mayweather will knock out Pacquiao. Floyd beats his wife.
Our system is inherently rigged against the will of the people.
They have 50% of the vote, and in a democracy, they should have 50% of the seats.
But if you live in an insanely gerrymandered district, your vote functionally doesn't matter.
We drew the map in a way that even though we get 50% of the vote, we're gonna get 13 out of the 18 seats.
You don't actually have the ability to translate the will of the voters in your area into actual government policy.
They should not be allowed to gerrymander these districts. We should actually have a democracy.
All right, welcome back to the conversation. There's been a lot of talk about what is the right model in terms of treating coronavirus. Should we do more testing, less testing? Some of the answers are clear, but there's a lot we could learn from what other nations have done. Well, that's what Andrew Romano set out to study. He's a Yahoo News national correspondent, and he wrote about the German model versus the Swedish model, and he joins us now. Andrew, great to have you on the Young Turks.
Hey, thanks for having me.
No problem. So, Andrew, first let's talk about the Swedish model, because a lot of right-wingers, including Rand Paul, are quoting it and saying it's great, it's amazing, that's the right way we should go. So what did Sweden do?
Yeah, so Sweden never instituted a hard lockdown. They basically advised the public there to practice, common sense social distancing measures. They limited gatherings to 50 people or less, but they let businesses stay open, bars, restaurants to some degree, schools to some degree. And the whole point was to sort of put agency with the population as opposed to putting in place, harsh lockdown measures. And to kind of let it, to a certain degree, the pandemic kind of run its course through the population. It's been there's been some positive aspects of this and some negative aspects, which we can discuss.
I do want to get to that in a second. First, let's lay out the German model as well. So what do the Germans do instead?
The Germans did a hard lockdown. They relied heavily on data, especially R0, which is the measure of the transmissibility of the virus at any given point. If R0 is at 1.0, it means that each infected person is one person. If it goes below 1, then fewer. So shrinking if it's below 1, growing if it's above 1. And they kind of measured that, watched it closely, and used it to determine policy. So they did a hard lockdown. Once they saw that case numbers and deaths were declining, once they saw that R0 number coming down, they decided to reopen with a data-driven sort of snapback measure in place. If cases sort of progress past a certain point in a given municipality, then lockdown would resume. So they're in the process of sort of dealing with that now. They've seen it go up in some places. They've put lockdown back in place in those areas. But in general, they've done pretty well as they've tried to emerge from lockdown.
How important is testing to the German model?
It's very important. I mean, they instituted widespread testing early on. They tested people who weren't necessarily showing symptoms to get a sense of the scale of the pandemic in the country. They've been pretty methodical and organized about it, as you would, expect Germans to be.
How about reopening? You mentioned that they had reopened in a lot of places. Are they more reopened than we are at this point?
Well, I mean, measuring how reopened the United States is a difficult thing because we're such a patchwork system. There are certain places like here in LA, which are doing a couple of things here and there to reopen, but really, we're pretty much still in lockdown. Places like Georgia, on the other hand, are, pretty much open. Businesses have resumed. You can go bowling, you can get your nails done, you can get your hair cut, which I'm sure a lot of us need at this point. In terms of Germany, I would say overall they're probably more reopened than us. They're a little further along this path, although we're catching up quickly in the United States.
Trump often brags about how much testing we do, and then if you ask him any questions about it, he gets really touchy and calls you nasty. But how are we doing in testing compared to, let's say, the Germans, who have been considered to be doing a really good job at it?
Yeah, we've ramped up. I mean, there was a point where our testing per capita was really, really low. We have been really ramping up a lot. So I think we're sort of getting to a place where we might be, at least in some places, and again, it's such a patchwork here, and some states are doing better than others, where we are on sort of par with Germany. I don't have the per capita numbers in front of me, but we've increased so much, I think, at this point that there are places where not enough people are taking advantage of the testing capacity. I think the broader question about reopening in terms of testing and contact tracing here is whether we have the sort of infrastructure in place to kind of jump in quickly, do a ton of tests, have the contact tracers in place to shut down flare-ups when they inevitably pop up in places that have reopened. That's what Germany has done really well. So it may be less a matter of the raw number of tests and more a matter of organization, how well that infrastructure is set up to respond quickly when we've seen flare-ups. So last week, they started to see the numbers creep up, I think, in 3 areas of the country, and they quickly put in place, resumed lockdown measures in those areas. I don't know that in the United States we have the sort of infrastructure in place to do that. I also don't know if we have the kind of political psychology to do that. I feel like when people are reemerging from lockdown here, especially with that American mentality of, sort of independence and individuality, that they're really going to want their state, local or federal officials to kind of come back in and put in more government control. In Germany, they've been a lot more sort of accepting of that.
But I want to go back to comparing the Swedish and the Germans, because the Swedes said, hey, let's just, maybe herd immunity. If enough people get it, we'll develop immunity. How did that turn out? When you compare the numbers of Sweden versus Germany, who wound up handling the crisis better so far?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's hard to say. So what we've seen in Sweden is disproportionately high fatality rate. So there are more people dying there per capita than in similar neighboring countries like Denmark and Norway that locked down. In fact, over the last 7 days, there was a new Reuters report about this that just came out. I believe that Sweden had the most per capita deaths from coronavirus of any country in Europe. And that's including countries that have been much harder hit, like Italy and France. So you're seeing, frankly, sort of more death per capita there. If the sort of fatality rate in Sweden was replicated here in the United States, we would have seen probably about 35,000 more deaths, so well over 100,000, just to give people a sense of that. That has been the downside of the Swedish approach. The upside is that people haven't sort of retreated into their homes as much. There hasn't been as much isolation. They felt a little more connected, so economically there's some sort of mixed signs. We'll see what happens, but that at least in the first quarter of the year, their economy has not taken as much of a hit as neighboring countries. So there's sort of upside and downside to it. It's kind of a question of how much government control are you willing to accept in exchange for how much of a fatality rate. And Sweden is leaning more to sort of letting the virus kind of run its course a little bit through the population.
Yeah, so I get it. I'm not surprised that their economy would be doing a little bit better because they didn't have to lock it down. So that's logical. On the other hand, the highest death per capita of that neighborhood is not a good sign. And so then it gets to the question of who's dying. So in terms of people getting sick, anybody can get sick. So, but in terms of the people who are more likely to die, well, it's been the elderly. And so if that equation holds, it seems to me, looking at it from the outside, that what the Swedes decided to do was, in effect, whether they intended to or not, is sacrifice the old to preserve the economy and their freedom of movement. And that seems to have been the result.
Yeah, it's a harsh equation, but there is some truth to that. I mean, obviously, if you're not putting in place stricter social distancing measures, the virus is going to spread, and it's going to affect more vulnerable populations because of that. So, as you said, the elderly in Sweden sort of disproportionately affected. I believe something of half of the deaths have occurred in elder care homes. They've admitted that that's been a huge problem there. In immigrant communities as well, it's been a problem, and so it's affected more vulnerable people, and that does seem to be, to some degree, the trade-off they're making. I think the question is, they've been kind of circumspect about whether they're actually trying to achieve herd immunity, but the epidemiologist who's kind of in charge of their program there has claimed that something like 25% of people in the country have contracted the virus, whether it's symptomatic or asymptomatic, that there's a large number of people who've had this already and that they're closer to achieving that herd immunity. Now, that data is very suspect. It would suggest, a sort of a prevalence rate that was equivalent to New York City's and the New York metropolitan area, where there's been far more deaths than you've seen in Sweden. And so it doesn't seem like they have their data right on that. And if they don't, it means they're not nearly as close to achieving herd immunity as they think, and that the virus is going to continue progressing through the population and continue affecting these vulnerable, members of the community.
Yeah, so I get the trade-offs. I don't know about other folks. I love my parents too much to make that trade-off. So no deal for me. But last thing here is we're out of time, Andrew. Is there really a case to be made against the German model? If you can do that amount of testing and tracing, is there really a downside to doing it that way? Because it seems like they reopen the economy quicker and they have less deaths. So where's the downside?
Yeah, I think the answer to that question is the if that you proposed there. If you can do it, if you can do that tracing, if you can do that testing, and if you're willing to accept as a society that level of government intervention. And America's a very different country than Germany, and we haven't put in place the infrastructure as rigorously, and we don't seem to be as politically open to the kind of snapback measures that Germany has put in place. So I'm skeptical that we can do that here in the United States. It seems like we're moving almost more towards a Swedish kind of model, at least in some states, and we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have a sense of how that's going to play out. And that might be why Florida and Georgia currently are hiding their real numbers on coronavirus cases. All right, Andrew Romano from Yahoo News. Everybody check it out. Really great article comparing the two systems. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Anyone for tennis? Every player, unless they're from the same household, has to bring their own tennis balls so that you don't touch other people's tennis balls. You can kick their balls, but you can't touch them. I'm gonna blush, sorry.
Go ahead, girl.
If you're playing with someone in your household, you can't touch those tennis balls. To avoid confusion...
Go over there and touch it.
To avoid confusion between whose balls are whose, you can use a marker to put someone's initials on them.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
Welcome to the Young Turks. I'm Anna Kasparian. Joining us today is John Idarola because it's Wednesday. It's Wednesday.
Look at the good
And he
mood
understands
on you.
white balance. He understands white balance way better than I do on my camera.
I do.
But it's okay.
You've got the white portion. It's the balance that you don't quite have.
Yeah, despite the skin tone that you guys are seeing on camera right now, I am actually pretty tanned because I have some time to like go for walks every day, so I get a lot more sun than I typically do. But you wouldn't be able to tell from like the porcelain skin tone that's deceptively being transmitted to your computer, your phone, your television, wherever you're watching this. All right, so I just want to tell our audience that they're incredible, they're awesome, not a big deal. You guys are planting trees the way you're planting progressive ideology in American culture and politics. Because of your involvement with our partner, Aspiration, you've planted more than 12,000 trees. And it's part of an effort that Aspiration has to help the environment. And it's important to plant trees, especially considering some of the damage we've done to our environment through several decades. So go to aspiration.com/TYT to learn more. And then also, if you loved Cenk's interview with his father a few years ago, you're going to love his book. And we're selling it at Shop TYT. Go to shoptyt.com and learn about, what Dogan Yuger experienced with the American dream. Unfortunately, an American dream that's becoming more and more difficult to accomplish these days. But he's just an inspirational, incredible person, and I highly recommend you guys check it out.
I
All
love
right.
that. Oh my God, that's awesome.
I know. It really is. So, and if you haven't watched that interview on TYT interviews or The Conversation, please make sure you check it out. It was really good. And I think it's like one of the most viewed TYT interviews we've had.
Really?
So,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah. It's really good. Anyway, well, we also have something else that's really good, and that's our coverage of the news today. Let's get started.
When we have a lot of cases, I don't look at that as a bad thing. I look at that as, in a certain respect, as being a good thing.
That is Donald Trump attempting to spin the insanely high number of coronavirus cases in the United States as a good thing. Now, he explains why in this next video, but as you're watching him lie to the American people, just keep in mind that this is an individual who has downplayed the importance of coronavirus testing and contact tracing. Take a look.
Testing 14 million people, you're going to find many more cases. Many of these people aren't very sick, but they still go down as a case. So actually, the number of cases, and we're also a much bigger country than most. So when we have a lot of cases, I don't look at that as a bad thing. I look at that as, in a certain respect, as being a good thing because it means our testing is much better. So if we were testing 1 million people instead of 14 million people, we would have far fewer cases, right? So I view it as a badge of honor. Really, it's a badge of honor. It's a great tribute to the testing and all of the work that a lot of professionals have done.
Now, to kind of give you some more context into this story, keep in mind that more than 93,000 Americans have already died due to coronavirus, and more than 1.5 million Americans have contracted the virus. And it's also worth noting that while the situation with testing has improved, there's no doubt, in some cases, it's still incredibly difficult for some people to get tests. And despite what we've heard from Congress, testing is still not free. People are getting billed for it. But John, if I recall correctly, Donald Trump was probably the #1 person who was pretty much against testing. And now all of a sudden he's saying, no, we got it good. The high numbers in the US, badge of honor. It's because we have the best testing. Big testing, strong testing.
The point that he was trying to make, sort of there, he tried to make almost the exact same point last week, but said that tests are a bad thing because then it seems like you have a higher number when really, like, on a day-by-day basis, I don't know what his position on testing is going to be. And I mean purely his stated position. His substantive position, I understand that's consistent. The states are on their own. He's going to do as little as humanly possible to help them. Now, thankfully, the amount of testing per day has been trending up because the states have been doing everything they can. That's good. It's still not where it needs to be, but that is good. His point about the badge of honor, though, like, yes, if if we didn't do as much testing, we would have fewer cases. We'd also have fewer cases if we had fewer cases. Like if we hadn't had coronavirus spread all across the country, the numbers would be lower that way too, except that would actually be less sick people rather than your ridiculous metaphor that just involves more national ignorance of the problem. And the issue is that we can, like, yes, I want us to find every case, and having more cases recorded is a consequence of doing more testing. But at the end of the day, also, like, I don't care about his badge of honor for testing or whatever. The number that I care about is 93,000, and that's the number that have already died, and that's a number that he has been running from as fast as he can, and not even acknowledge. Him and Fox News, you'll never hear those numbers again from them.
Well, this is also a number that's expected to rise. So by June, the number of deaths is expected to be past 100,000. And it's just such a devastating number, especially when you consider that there could have been efforts made early on in this pandemic when Trump was warned over and over again by various people, including his own trade advisor, about the severity of this pandemic. He did not take it seriously. He felt that his trade negotiations with China were much more important than doing the right thing and protecting Americans from this deadly virus. And, just to quickly debunk his nonsense about testing. And when I say debunk, just the way that he's spinning this as if he's always valued testing and he's been a champion of testing in the United States. We all know that's not true, but I always love to show the evidence of why that's not true. Here's a little piece of it.
Have a total of 15 cases. And again, when you have 15 people, and the 15 within a couple of days is going to be down to close to zero, that's a pretty good job we've done. Don't forget, we have more cases than anybody in the world. But why? Because we do more testing. When you test, you have a case. When you test, you find something is wrong with people. If we didn't do any testing, we would have very few cases. We have the best testing in the world. Could be the testing's, frankly, overrated. Maybe it is overrated.
So there you see the back and forth, right? So the testing's overrated. I mean, wouldn't we want to keep people in the dark about whether or not they have the virus to begin with? I mean, that's the right way to go about it. And look, the testing is just one of his mistakes. I'm going to go through a list. It's not even a incredibly comprehensive list, but here are some of the main issues with the Trump administration's response to coronavirus. So first off, before the virus even hit the United States back in 2018, Trump reorganized the National Security Council, which included the Global Health Security and Biodefense Unit. That was a unit put together by the Obama administration to respond effectively to pandemics. They created this agency during the Ebola outbreak, and Trump decided to disband it. So that's a little bit of an issue. Reuters wrote that in May of 2018, the Global Health Security and Biodefense Unit was disbanded, and its head, who was a top White House official in the NSC for leading U.S. response against a pandemic, left the Trump administration. Some members of the Global Health and Security team were merged into other units within the NSC, but those other units were not tasked with responding to pandemics, which is part of the reason why we were completely unprepared and vulnerable from the very beginning. Also, Trump opted to use his own tests, basically develop tests here in the United States for coronavirus, rather than asking the World Health Organization to use tests that they had already developed, they already had. And that put us behind quite a bit. So the U.S. did not use COVID-19 diagnostic tests provided by the World Health Organization in favor of producing its own, probably so some of Trump's cronies can develop their own and make a little bit of money off of it. Also, keep in mind that in February, when, again, it was already clear that this pandemic was serious, the virus is severe, And we have a shortage, remember, of the medical equipment in order to keep our health workers safe. Mike Pompeo brags on Twitter about sending all of this valuable medical material to China. He had tweeted, we have coordinated with U.S. organizations to transport more humanitarian relief to people in Wuhan. Personal protective equipment and other medical supplies donated by these organizations can help save lives in China and help protect people from coronavirus. That was on February 7th. And as you guys know, there was a severe shortage of respirators, ventilators to follow what Pompeo had tweeted there. The Trump administration did not replenish the national stockpile. They also lagged on invoking the Defense Production Act in order to produce the medical supplies that we so desperately needed. I mean, the list goes on and on. They promoted the use of an unproven and dangerous drug as a treatment for coronavirus, hydroxychloroquine. That was incredibly irresponsible and has not been medically proven, scientifically proven as a treatment for coronavirus. He also fired a Health and Human Services official, Dr. Rick Bright, for refusing to promote the use of hydroxychloroquine as a treatment for coronavirus. And he also egged on, the stay-at-home, anti-stay-at-home protesters who were protesting against Trump's own guidelines. It's just unbelievable. So he's the failure. This is not a badge of honor, okay? Nearly 100,000 people have already died. This is not something to be proud of. And I'm glad to see at least some Republicans on social media calling Trump out for this. This is not good framing at all.
Yeah, and we're trying to convince people, like, hey, can we all briefly acknowledge and remember going into this election that Trump did an absolutely horrendous job and tens of thousands of people died that didn't have to? Like, we have to try to convince that to people who think that you get coronavirus from 5G towers and things like that. That's the ridiculous job that we have. When it makes no sense. I understand realistically why there's no push for actual consequences for what he did and didn't do, because you can't impeach him. It's just impossible. It'll never happen. Whatever. They control it, and he could walk around the country with a flamethrower, burning down orphanages, and nothing would happen. Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell would defend him. But all of the things that you pointed out, all of the different things that we've learned from Rick Bright and all of that, all of the warnings that were given and they didn't do anything, it is one thing to just see it as incompetence, that he should have done these things and, oh, gosh, he didn't do it. But we know from, the story that I can't believe was not bigger news, 2 sources in meetings with Trump and Dr. Fauci, with Trump repeatedly asking, why can't we just let it wash over the country? Why can't we just let everyone get it? And then quickly, a lot of people die, and then theoretically we'll have herd immunity. And then we don't have to shut down things because we'll get over it in a month or whatever. Like, he brought that up and had to repeatedly be told that we cannot simply let millions of people die. That's not an option. And so then the story's gone.
It's amazing. Yeah, I know, because he floods the news cycle.
But then all of these different things where hypothetically you could limit its spread, he didn't do. So it looks like he was not actually talked out of it. That in terms of actually rallying the U.S. government to stop its spread, he continually stopped it from doing that. And so he was warned. He knew what the consequences were. He still took these actions. Tens of thousands of people have died. If he isn't going to be held accountable for that, why would any president ever be held accountable for literally anything they do? Because I guarantee it's going to be a long time, God, I hope, before a president you can point to where their horrible decisions and ignorance and hatred of science leads to tens of thousands of people and counting dying.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that this administration has really uncovered how fragile our system of checks and balances really is, and how easily it can be manipulated or basically overcome simply by the partisanship that we're seeing right now, right? So, look, I don't think that's true of Democrats. I think that Democrats, if they are facing enough backlash, will change their behavior. For instance, I was reading about how Obama fired an attorney general from the Bush era pretty soon after he got elected in 2008. And there was so much backlash about that he never attempted to fire, I'm sorry, I said attorney general, didn't I? I meant inspector general. He never fired an inspector general again, okay? So like Democrats operate differently. And I don't know, some might call it weakness, but honestly, I think that, there should be a system of checks and balances. I don't think any party is innocent of wrongdoing at all times. But with Republicans, they just steamroll. The Trump administration has shown, I can go ahead and break as many laws. I can go ahead and show my complete and utter disdain for the American people and how little I value their lives. And regardless of what I do, I'm just going to keep steamrolling. And I'm going to bully Republican lawmakers into supporting me and defending me, because if they have the audacity to speak up against me, I'm going to be vicious and I'm going to threaten their political careers. I mean, it's devastating to see it. And I don't know what the answer is. All right, well, let's move on to some more wrongdoing by the Trump administration.
One senior official inside the CDC says they told the White House about the virus's rapid spread across Europe, but that the White House was extremely focused on China and not wanting to anger Europe, even though that's where most of our cases were originally coming from.
More and more members from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention are speaking out regarding Donald Trump's treatment of healthcare professionals, medical professionals, scientists, individuals who are, the actual experts in how to appropriately respond to this pandemic and how to keep people safe so they don't contract this deadly virus. And what the CDC workers have told the press is that they feel that politics comes before doing the right thing and keeping people safe during the pandemic. That's how the Trump administration has treated this. They also share with CNN a number of other issues pertaining to censorship by the Trump administration. Let's watch.
Spoke to 6 current CDC staff members, and many of them say the White House has stifled the CDC in its coronavirus response, and at times limited its ability to provide health information to the public. One source telling CNN, "We are working under a black cloud of an administration that doesn't have our backs." Another saying, "We've been muzzled."
So, John, they say they've been muzzled. I mean, this isn't surprising news for anyone who's been following Trump's treatment of the CDC. Just keep in mind that they had previously attempted to release guidelines on how to reopen the country in a safe way. And Trump decided to shelve those guidelines because for him, opening the country up prematurely is much more important than doing the right thing and keeping people safe. But what do you make of this? I mean, I love that they're speaking to the press, but will there be any type of positive outcome from this revelation?
I mean, hopefully. One of the reasons I think that Rick Bright's testimony seemed to matter so much was we want outspoken people on the inside who are revealing what's going on, that are only in it for saving lives, for the science. People don't go to work at the CDC because they're hardcore partisans. They go there because they want to help out in situations like this. And they'll serve under multiple administrations, and sometimes Republican, then Democrat, then Republican again. And it must be incredibly frustrating on a daily basis to know that decisions are being made without any reference to the advice of the people best trained in the entire world to get us through the situation. That's got to be incredibly frustrating to know that if you were to speak publicly, you would likely be fired. You'd be pushed out. And even when you do it in a restrained way, like with the guidelines that you referenced, that it's probably going to be censored. Imagine, it must feel like you're under, some other regime, that surely this can't be the United States. This has got to be something else where they will stop you from speaking out. They won't take your advice. They're just going to leave it up to the governors in all of these cases. That has got to be so incredibly demoralizing. And they're probably talking to people who feel a little bit more secure, a little bit more senior, still anonymous. But imagine if you're at the lower levels of the CDC, or you're thinking about getting involved in something like this. How demoralizing about the future of your career must this be? I mean, we've faced sort of a version of that in terms of media, about seeing, who gets pushed, what sorts of messages are allowed, how resistant people are to inconvenient truth and things like that. But in medicine, it's obviously much higher stakes, and to see that what studies show and the evidence doesn't matter at all, that they've decided based purely on either political metrics or on Wall Street, it's all driven by that. And I can't imagine what it must be like to be working at the CDC right now.
I mean, just to buttress your point about how everything is business driven for Trump, just today, and we're so overwhelmed with news stories every day that it didn't make it in the rundown today, but our viewers should know, just today, Trump signed an executive order deregulating, basically repealing a number of industry regulations in order to help the economy, stimulate the economy, because at the end of the day, that's all he cares about. Because the success of the economy means that it's more likely that he could get reelected. His own investments would do well. Donald Trump, again, looks out for Donald Trump. And I think the point that you made earlier in the show today about how he asked some of his advisors whether we can just let this virus wash over the country and kill people and then just be done with it. That's the way he thinks. He doesn't really care or value human lives. And the CDC, I'm glad that they're speaking out, and I'm glad that they're doing so anonymously. I think it's usually better for a news story to have actual named sources, but I can understand why they would speak to the press anonymously, because first off, you need to have experts doing the hard work. And I'm glad that they're not about to get fired because they finally spoke out publicly against Trump. And secondly, Trump would be brutal. I mean, the stuff that I'm seeing about Dr. Rick Bright right now in conservative media is disgusting. And all he wanted to do was avoid encouraging people to use a drug that could lead to long-term health ramifications and heart problems.
Yeah. Well, I sort of almost can understand. Trump hates Bright, so it's going to be like Piranha. They're going to be destroying him. But they're savaging Fauci on a daily basis. Even on Fox, Trump still ostensibly accepts Fauci. He's kept him in the position, but because what he says is inconvenient, they're attacking him brutally. And these are people that have been around for a really long time. Again, if you're not even that senior, you must know that if you were to speak openly, if you were a mid-range CDC researcher that did an on-camera interview on Chris Cuomo tonight, don't bother going back to work tomorrow. It's not going to happen. You would be immediately gone. Best case scenario, they bring you in to testify once, but your career is probably still over, at least as long as the Republicans are in charge.
Exactly. And just to quickly go over a few of the guidelines from the CDC in terms of how to do social distancing safely and how to reopen responsibly so people don't get sick and die. Even though the Trump administration refused to release those guidelines, the CDC did quietly release it themselves over the weekend. And here's what we've learned. For instance, as restrictions across the country on restaurants and bars ease, the CDC recommends owners give workers at a higher risk of getting sick a job that limits the person's interaction with customers. I mean, this is just common sense. So if you have an employee who is more likely to contract the virus just due to the nature of their job, maybe keep them away from a giant volume of people, right? It's just common sense. The fact that the Trump administration was against, releasing this to the public is just sick. Here's some more. When mass transit resumes its full service, the agency recommends being prepared to adjust routes based on the different levels of virus spread and to coordinate with local health officials about prevention strategies such as wearing a face covering, which has somehow become a controversial and divisive topic in the United States. For businesses that provide childcare during the pandemic, the CDC recommends having plans in place, for example, to have substitute workers if staff members are sick and requiring staff and children older than 2 to wear face coverings. This is the kind of information that the Trump administration censors while simultaneously encouraging you to take a drug that has not been proven as a treatment for coronavirus and could lead to severe heart problems and death. Yeah. That's the leadership we have.
Yep. And now on that, now there are others saying that they're taking it too, because that is how you demonstrate loyalty in a death cult. you actively participate in the incredibly ridiculous, irrational things that the cult leader demands.
I don't believe any of them. Not a single one of them. They're not going to risk their lives. They know what the risks are. I don't know.
I hope
what
they're
this,
lying.
Yeah. Look, honestly, I like on a personal level, I don't care. Like if all these right wingers are legitimately taking hydroxychloroquine because they're idiots and they think that it's smart to take something that hasn't been medically proven as a treatment and could actually kill them, I believe in liberty. Do you? The problem is encouraging average Americans to do it, and they don't know. I mean, some people might actually like panic and think maybe this is a good idea. The FDA has said it is not a good idea. Multiple clinical trials have indicated it is not a good idea. Please, for the love of God, listen to the actual experts here. And for right-wingers who think it's a good idea, again, do you, but don't go around encouraging other people to take something that could really harm them. We got to take a break. When we come back, severe voter suppression is in the works by Republicans, and we need to do something about it for this upcoming general election. I'll give you the details on that and more when we come back.
I'm old enough that I remember when Captain Crunch put the berries in there.
Yay, crunch berries!
And I was like, ooh, the fake berries.
Remember?
We're gonna try that.
We did a story back in the day about how a woman sued, General Mills.
She'd been eating it for 4 years, believing that it was actual berries.
Yeah. She's like, these aren't real berries at all. I'm like, I got news for you. Captain Crunch isn't really a captain or a person. Joining me now, legendary whistleblower and American hero, Edward Snowden. First question is, hey, where are you?
I'm in my apartment in Moscow.
All of a sudden, in the studio, Jim Gaffigan, everybody.
Mental illness is, completely undiagnosed in our society.
It's not about a particular administration. It's about a broken system of power, and through that, really, the instrumentalization of a system of not justice, but injustice.
People understand whether they claim to deny climate change or not. Our collective house is in crisis. We're also dealing with the legacy of 40 years of economic policies that have made people's lives more precarious.
Sometimes you got to force people into their humanity. Sometimes you have to shake people into empathy.
Senator Elizabeth Warren joins us in the studio.
Healthcare is a basic human right, and we are fighting for basic human rights.
In order to actually achieve that vision of everyone having access to the same resources and getting to determine the outcome of their life, we have a lot of work to do, and it needs to start right now.
Here's something you may not know. When you deposit your money in a big bank, it doesn't just sit, safe and secure, in a vault. Instead, your money could end up building oil pipelines, mining for coal, or drilling in the Arctic. So if you're concerned about the planet, give your money something good to do. Make the move to green with Aspiration's fossil fuel-free account and join the thousands each week who are switching to save their dollars and save the planet at the same time.
Cenk Uygur joins us.
We are progressive and unapologetically so. Very happy to say that millennial and Gen Z generations are massively progressive along with us.
Democrats, they've been so weak for so long. For God's sake, fight for your side.
I would not like to compromise with Republicans. I would like to defeat them. Lynn, do you support Donald Trump?
Yes, I like Donald Trump.
Well, that's why we think you're racist. The 5 black kids in Central Park did not commit the rape. He said, who cares? Keep him in prison anyway. They probably did something. He's a terrible guy. Very fine people on the side chanting, Jews will not replace us. He says we should ban all Muslims. Well, that's bigotry by definition. He said it during the campaign trail over and over again. Called Latinos criminals and rapists. See, you're used to Republicans being strong on television and Democrats cowering. New day in America. Progressives, we actually fight back.
ShopTYT.com has new shirts like this one. And you're thinking, Cenk, what is that one? I can't see it other than the black. Yes, so I'll show it to you. If you can read this, you're not practicing social distancing. Yes! Now, you were practicing social distancing. This is over video. But overall, you get it. ShopTYT.com.
We found the perfect person to lead the Army. Allison Hartson.
The establishment media works hand in glove with our corporate legislators, and our corporate legislators work hand in glove with the corporation. And we're going to make it so that it's a decentralized force throughout the country so that we can quickly identify stories, quickly identify troll farms, and go in and neutralize the enemy, and then start building responsible media throughout the country and on every platform available.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to TYT. Anna and John with you. I wanted to read a few member comments before moving on to the rest of the news. Meg writes in and says, kind of like how you definitely can't be pregnant unless you take the pregnancy test. So it's, I mean, use Trump's logic or lack of logic and apply it to anything else, like pregnancy, or like refusing to test people to suppress the numbers doesn't like actually suppress the number of people who get the virus.
Yeah,
people will still get sick and they'll still die.
I want a reporter to ask him, like, I just want you to be very clear. Do you get that a person doesn't have coronavirus once the test comes positive? Like that they already had it? Do you understand that? He'd probably call the person nasty.
Oh, I mean, that's his go-to. So Captain Cornball writes in and says, whistleblowers in the CDC complaining about Trump treatment of scientists. Come on, Brett. Where's the banner with Revenge of the Nerds? Missed opportunity, Brett.
That would have been good.
And Tina writes in and says, a badge of honor to cause the suffering of over 1 million and the death of almost 100,000 people, plus the economic ruin of tens of millions without any true financial assistance is criminal. And real quick, a few super chats. Politickin Lynn says, America is quickly unraveling. TYT, progressives, we're up. Let's make changes. And Bonita says, as long as the GOP is willing to be Trump's accessory to his bad, immoral, and probably illegal behavior, he will continue to do what he likes because no one will hold him accountable. Yeah. I mean, you really do need principled Republicans to do the right thing in holding Trump accountable. And it's not the culture we're living in anymore. It's pretty devastating.
We barely have that on the left.
Yeah, I know. Well, let's talk about voter suppression, because this is an issue that needs a lot more focus. And I want TYT to really be the go-to, outlet for you to get news about what the GOP is doing to suppress voters in this upcoming election. So Trump is threatening to pull federal funding from the state of Michigan, which, by the way, is dealing with a pretty disastrous flood right now due to a levee that failed. But the reason why he's threatening Michigan is because the state wants to make it as easy as possible for voters to be able to exercise their voting rights. And in order to do that, they need to feel safe voting. Many people are unlikely to go to the polling places in the general election for obvious reasons. I think people are nervous about contracting the virus, and they might feel more comfortable with mail-in ballots. And so Michigan plans to send mail-in voting applications, okay? They need to apply to all voters in the state, and Trump thinks that's illegal. He tweeted the following, breaking. Michigan sends absentee ballots, it's not absentee ballots, they're applications, to 7.7 million people ahead of the primaries and the general election. This was done illegally and without authorization by a rogue Secretary of State. I will ask to hold up funding to Michigan if they want to go down this voter fraud path. Now, keep in mind that the GOP also alleged that Lancaster County was engaging in voter fraud because they opened up a polling place so people could vote in the special election in California. So voting by mail is fraudulent, according to Trump, and going to a voting place to vote is fraudulent, according to Trump. Seems like any policy that makes it easy for anyone who wants to vote vote is considered bad by Donald Trump. Weird.
You might be onto something there.
It's just so pathetic. And by the way, really, you're going to talk about the Secretary of State in Michigan? Can we talk about Brian Kemp, who was the Secretary of State as he was simultaneously running for governor in the state of Georgia? He stole that election, and we're going to have a conversation about the Secretary of State in Michigan because they sent vote by mail applications to voters who might not want to go to a voting place. So let me give you some more of this story because luckily there was a response by the Secretary of State. She tweeted, "I also have a name. It's Jocelyn Benson, and we sent applications, not ballots, just like my GOP colleagues in Iowa, Georgia, Nebraska, and West Virginia." And by the way, Trump also recently attacked Nevada, saying that state of Nevada thinks they can send out illegal vote-by-mail ballots, creating a great voter fraud scenario for the state and the U.S. They can't. If they do, I don't know why "I think" is in quotation marks. I think I can hold up funds to the state. And sorry, you must not cheat in elections. And by the way, he can't unilaterally do that anyway. So he's trying to bully, intimidate, threaten, but Congress gets to decide whether these states are appropriated any money.
Yeah, and you can't take money away from the states unless they restrict voting for you. That's not a thing you can do, and I don't just mean ethically, obviously. I mean legally. You can't do that. He's threatening to break the law there. If we lived in a rational society, he would not be able to get away with that. If we were in a rational time, those pair of tweets would be impeachable effectively, that he's saying, unless states restrict the vote, I'm not going to give them money. And by the way, I'm going to choose when one has been hit by effectively a natural disaster with dams going down. I'm going to say, well, maybe you need my help, but maybe there won't be any help unless you stop people from voting remotely during a pandemic as well. Like, I don't understand under normal times how the Republican Party can be so clearly and obviously and consistently against democracy in America. But in particular, during the time when, according to all the commercials I watch, this is a special time where we're keeping apart but staying together, that he's saying, no, you shouldn't be able to vote. I know a lot of you are worried about that, about being able to do that. I'm going to make it as difficult as humanly possible. He has made the calculation that there will be no cost for that. The Republicans seem to agree. I want to know why there won't be a cost for that, why they can be so blatantly against the American people voting, and why so many Americans have been able to be duped by the fraud of voter fraud.
Yeah. And look, we know that while Republicans claim that they believe in democracy, they want to protect democracy, they want to spread democracy abroad, we all know it's all BS, because every once in a while, people like Trump will say the quiet parts out loud. And when it comes to making it easier for people who want to vote, Trump is clear that he's not in favor of that because that means some pretty harsh consequences for the right wing. Take a look.
I'll tell you this, if you look at before and after, the things they had in there were crazy. They had things, levels of voting that if you ever agreed to it, you'd never have a Republican elected in this country again. They had things in there about, election days and what you do and all sorts of clawbacks. And they had things that were just totally crazy.
That is amazing.
So he's just made it clear, voting at levels where a Republican would never win again, because that there are multiple efforts to suppress certain voters who would vote against Republican candidates. And in Nevada specifically, Republicans have been itching to turn a congressional seat from blue to red. This is a primary having to do with Democratic Representative Steve Horsford. And they're hoping that they can help the Republican challenger to this representative in the state of Nevada, which is why Trump got involved in commenting on what's happening in that state. But look, make no mistake, you look at polls, and even though we've certainly shared some of our critiques of Joe Biden, Joe Biden's been doing pretty well in a lot of national polls, a lot of state polls. For instance, a Roanoke College poll released Tuesday shows that Biden has a 51 to 39% lead over Trump in Virginia, and also a survey of 600 likely voters in Arizona conducted from May 9th to the 11th by OH Predictive Insights found Biden leading Trump 50% to 43% in the state. In 2016, Trump beat former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton there by 3.5 percentage points. Now, look, it's even though it's 6 months and it feels like the general election is close, there's still a lifetime before the general election. But I want to make sure that we're paying close attention to these voter suppression efforts now, and that we do what we can to organize and prevent it from happening. Because the way Democrats campaign, what they're offering policy-wise, really none of that's going to matter if these elections are run in a way that suppresses voters who would vote for them. And so this is a big problem. And, you know, when we come back from the break, I actually have one other story involving voter suppression that I want to share with you all. This one is terrifying, and it's meant to be terrifying. So don't miss that when we come back from the break.
All right, we're back to the donor wall. These are the folks who gave $1,000 or more to help us in our audience fundraising drive at tyt.com/go. You guys might remember David from Chicago. He put us over the top in April. That's awesome, David. I know Anna and John gave you a shout out on the show, but I want to give you another shout out, put you on the wall. And I heard you love True North. That's awesome. I got good news about True North coming up soon for members. Ooh, fun. All right, here comes David. Made a giant difference. David gave $10,000. So we love you, brother. We love everybody who gives. Everybody's got different portions. You give $3, we love you anyway. We do shout outs for other folks at that time. So next is Gregory Jerkowski. Okay, that's a solid Eastern European name. Gregory, you're the best for contributing. We're super appreciate it. And here you go. And then I'm gonna go to Brian Smith. Brian's got a fun YouTube channel. Goku Lamb Boar. Is it Genie or Guinea? But I do know this. Brian, my son loves things like Goku. So I'll take it out first, and then if it's kosher, I'll watch it with him. So thank you, Brian. Really appreciate it. Brian Smith. I hope we run out of space. It's starting to get that way. And then finally, Alex Wolf. Alex, you're kind of awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. It's almost like Alex Wolf Pack. Wolf-pack.com. All right, you guys are the best of the best. Let's keep it going. I got a little bit more space here. tyt.com/go. You're coming to my house. You're already here. You're in my house. Thank you, guys. We love you.
Never in my life did I think I would like to see a dictator. But if there's going to be one, I want it to be Trump.
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
Where's the line? We've crossed every line you can imagine.
We are a socialist country. It's socialism for the rich.
Tick-tock, tick-tock. You don't have to know the truth, just believe what they tell you.
There is no bounds to their monstrous hypocrisy.
Tick-tock.
I think we're gonna win the Senate in 2020. And I think we're gonna have the House, and I think we're gonna have the presidency.
Tick-tock.
And in 2020, we're going to clean your clock, and we're gonna run you out of town, and we're gonna have an actual democracy in this country. November of 2020 could also be potentially the greatest day of our lives. Let us whisper of a dream. As we're all shut in now and trying to watch as much stuff as possible, pro tip, you actually can get more from Netflix and other services if you switch to watching them from a different country. But Cenk, how would I do that? Hello, nordvpn.com/TYT. If you do that, you can switch viewing it from Albania. That's amazing. Plus, you get a free month. Plus, you get 70% off of a 3-year plan. Let's do it now. nordvpn.com/TYT.
Great. That's how you do when I smacked it back that I like.
Say hi to the camera.
I don't like this.
Hey guys, welcome back to TYT. I am going to go ahead and read a few comments before we get started with the rest of the stories. First, some super chats. Left is Best says, I've been hearing a lot of good things about, okay, I'm not going to read that. Oh, okay. It's a fake quote from Trump, just to like really highlight how ridiculous Trump's statements are. I've been hearing a lot of good things about cyanide and Kool-Aid. A lot of people are saying it. I mean, it's not that far off from the kind of nonsense you'd hear from Trump. Props writes in, I like that handle. Keep up the good work, TYT. Thank you for the kind comment. Isabel Thompson says, I think he actually thinks the whole country buys his BS. P.S. Anna is my expletive deleted spirit animal. Strong, fiery women like you make me proud to identify as a woman. Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. And from our members' comments, we have Jody R. writing in and saying, has anyone noticed he hasn't accused the states of Oregon, Washington, and Colorado of fraud for voting by mail? I wonder why that is. And by the way, he voted by mail in Florida. He's a joke. Anyway. Well, so John, I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this story, because this is something that concerns me. Because let's say you have a voting place, you're registered to vote, you're doing everything right, and you show up and you see these militant people trying to intimidate you. That's what some people might experience in swing states. So let's do this story. Republicans are looking to recruit 50,000 so-called poll watchers to intimidate voters. Now, they say that they want to go to these polling locations, specifically in swing states, in order to ensure that voter fraud isn't taking place. But make no mistake, this is the type of activity that the GOP had engaged in decades ago, and several federal courts had handed down rulings to basically stop Republicans, the Republican Party, from violating the voting rights of other people. So the Republican program that I'm speaking of today actually envisions recruiting up to 50,000 volunteers in 15 key states to monitor polling places and challenge ballots and voters deemed suspicious. This is part of a $20 million plan that also allots millions to challenge lawsuits by Democrats and voting rights advocates seeking to loosen state restrictions on balloting. Now, there was a court order vacated by federal courts back in 2018, and that's super relevant to what we're experiencing today, because that court order basically would have prevented the GOP from doing what it's planning to do with these so-called poll watchers. Now, the court actually had to make all these rulings in the past. I want to give you a little rundown of that. The court ban on Republican Party voter fraud operations was imposed in 1982 and then modified in 1986 and again in 1990, each time after courts found instances of Republicans intimidating or working to exclude minority voters in the name of preventing fraud. The party was found to have violated it yet again in 2004. So if you happen to live in a swing state and you're planning on going to a polling location to vote, just know that there's a possibility that you could run into people like this, and don't let them intimidate you, because that's the whole reason why they're there.
Yeah. My hope is that all it is an attempt to intimidate. The issue is that when you try to get 50,000 people to do this specific thing, you are probably going to draw people who like the idea of intimidating certain types of people. And so I worry that if you dispatch them all over the place, you're going to have incidents. You're going to have potentially violence, because you're going to have an overrepresentation of the sort of people that's what they think is missing from their life, is that sort of thing. It shouldn't be allowed. I couldn't say more about how much it sucks that it is allowed. Yeah, if you see it, I would just try to ignore them. Understand that there are still limitations on what they can do, exactly where they can be, and that sort of thing. And again, I'll give the answer that I give to every issue like this. It is insane that the Democrats have largely just surrendered on issues of substantive American democracy, that you get to have this constant decades-long war from the Republican Party, and you have some good, like nonprofits and stuff like that are trying to do the right thing to register people and expand access to the vote, but that you don't have anything like the sustained campaign that the Republicans have had. No response to it.
Yeah, look, that's one of the reasons why I want to focus on this story a little more up until the election, because if the Democratic Party isn't going to fight this as aggressively as they need to, I'm hoping that by informing voters, they'll understand what to expect, and maybe we can brainstorm and think of ways to kind of mitigate what Republicans are trying to do now. But honestly, when you think about it, one of the biggest issues here is that when you have a Republican president who gets to nominate federal judges, well, he's going to choose federal judges. We're going to vote in or rule in a way that he's going to like. And that's why it's such an issue to, even if we get Trump out of office, the damage that he's done to our courts in appointing all of these federal judges it will be long lasting, right? Mm-hmm. So regardless of what Democrats would like to do, legally speaking, the federal courts have vacated previous, rulings, court orders that would have limited what the GOP is going to do. This is why the courts matter. And it's incredibly important to consider, let's say, Supreme Court nominees when deciding who to vote for in an upcoming election. So again, just know what to expect. Democratic organizations, including the voting rights organization founded by Stacey Abrams, plans to send their own poll watchers to these swing states. I mean, I wish I felt better hearing that or reading that, but I don't want any type of violent situation to break out, because people should feel safe and comfortable casting their votes.
Yeah. Just was super fast. I mean, looking at the protests, you can't, it is seemingly impossible in recent years to get together a right-wing sort of effort like this and not have it attract, crazy extremists, separatists, anti-Semites, racists. Look at the signs that you're seeing and all that. Look at how ready people are to strap, an AR-15 to their back or whatever, and then get in someone's face. And especially in Michigan, they shut down a session of the legislature through the threat of political violence. And I'm not saying that that's the exact sort of people that the Republicans are hypothetically going to be looking for. But when those people hear that what the right needs is people to hang out near polling places, you don't think they're going to have stuff like that in Michigan as well?
Yeah, I don't put anything past them. Well, let's move on to an update on Pompeo and the Trump administration's decision to fire yet another inspector general, which we talked about earlier this week. So earlier this week, we shared a story regarding the Trump administration firing yet another inspector general. This is now the fourth inspector general fired in the spring alone, and it's very likely that Steve Linick was actually fired in retaliation for an investigation that he had launched against Mike Pompeo. Now, as we had mentioned earlier, there are two main issues with Pompeo. Number one, misuse of taxpayer money. And number two, which I would argue is a much bigger deal, Pompeo fast-tracking a weapons sale to Saudi Arabia, despite Congress passing laws preventing him from being able to do so. And so Pompeo had said that he did not recommend firing Linick in retaliation, and he couldn't have because he didn't know that he was being investigated. Except Linick had requested a meeting with Pompeo in order to ask him questions about the arms sale to Saudi Arabia. And shortly after that, Linick was let go by Donald Trump. And by the way, Pompeo doesn't hide the fact that he's the one who recommended firing Linick. He was asked about it during a press conference today, and here's what he had to say.
Several Senate Republicans say they want a specific explanation as to why the administration fired the Inspector General here. Senator Grassley says an expression of lost confidence without further explanation is not sufficient to fulfill the requirements of the IG Reform Act. Will you provide Congress a more detailed explanation on why you recommended the firing to the president? And will the State Department make the House Foreign Affairs Committee deadline for documents this Friday at 5?
So there's been lots of discussion about this. I've read a number of reports. Let me say three things. First, the president has the unilateral right to choose who he wants to be his inspector general at every agency in the federal government. They are presidentially confirmed positions, and those persons, just like all of us, serve at the pleasure of the President of the United States. In this case, I recommended to the president that Steve Linick be terminated. I frankly should have done it some time ago.
I think I gotta get you out, sir.
I'm happy to take one more.
Okay, Barbara, go ahead.
Okay, so you have said, sir, that Mr. Linick was undermining the department's mission. What exactly does that mean? Can you give us examples? Even the president doesn't know what that means. He says he didn't really know about the guy before you mentioned it. So what specifically has Mr. Linick done?
Yeah, unlike others, I don't talk about personnel matters. I don't leak to y'all.
Oh, what a convenient answer there. Clearly, Linick was investigating him. He didn't like it, and that's when he made the recommendation.
Yeah. I also love, hey, I'm not going to get into like specific personal stuff. Right after he's like, yeah, it was my decision. I fired him. Should have done it a long time ago. But
Totally,
I don't want to be specific. I don't want to say anything, like that's personal. That's between, yeah. A government, it's the same thing that we've seen for years. Government can't function, at the very least, for the purposes of helping the American people when it is run by people like Mike Pompeo, who are not in that position. Like, Mike Pompeo is not there waking up every day and just trying to help America's diplomatic position in the world. That's not at all what it is. He believes that it is his kingdom, the Department of State, and as you're going to get into, he's using it and our money for his own personal interests. And he's been apparently given, like, Trump likes him enough that Pompeo can just offer people up and Trump will fire him. I kind of buy that Trump has no idea why, potentially, is enough that Pompeo wanted him fired. That's all it takes.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Trump hates inspectors general. Like, he hates them. He hates having a watchdog. And honestly, I think that there's a pretty giant flaw in the way government works when government watchdogs can just easily be fired by the president with no real reason. I mean, they're supposed to be holding the executive branch accountable. That's the whole reason why they're there. The inspectors general, it's such a weird, like, grammatical thing. It drives me crazy. But inspectors general were, created after the Nixon Watergate scandal. But, like, how does it make sense to have the very person who is supposed to be the investigated make the decision as to whether or not the person investigating them should have their job? Like, anyway, so we have a few more minutes. I just want to share some details from an NBC News report. The report indicates that Pompeo has been using these State Department dinners, they're referred to as Madison dinners, to meet with a bunch of donors and have these lavish get-togethers on the taxpayer's dime. These dinners are supposed to be about foreign policy, but he's meeting with people like Reba McEntire and NASCAR driver Dale Earnhardt Jr. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Jared Kushner was given the task of creating peace in the Middle East. So who knows? Maybe a race car driver can do the same. It's just ridiculous.
They're good at dealing with pressure and stress. That's true. And just huge mega donors and the head guy at Chick-fil-A and the Schlaps and things like that. These are people that, you might look at this and say he's just trying to make sure that he has money lined up when he decides to run for office, or alternatively, the Chick-fil-A guy is going to, help with our diplomatic overtures to China. One of those two things. It's one of the two.
Yeah, you look, the Saudi arms sale could have actually broken laws, which it should be looked into and it should be investigated. We have people who don't value the rule of law leading the country, people who don't value human lives leading the country. And they're using our hard-earned money to meet with their donors and people who corrupt them and persuade them into implementing all of these dangerous and disastrous policies we've been experiencing so far in the Trump administration. Yeah. In the post-game show today, we're going to talk about Howard Stern dunking on Trump Jr., which is a super fun story. And we have a lot more. Become a member. Go to tyt.com/join to do so. And for everyone else, have an awesome night. We'll see you soon. Hello to our wonderful members. TYT Postgame, Anna and John with you. How you doing, John?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I feel you. I feel, yeah, I feel you. I think like last week was so difficult that like nothing feels bad right now. Like I just feel really happy.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, so that's why I've been in a good mood because it's like my mom's here, like not here, but like she's alive, she's recovering, and that like just took so much despair away from me out of my life, you know, like So that's why. But like once like reality kicks in, I'll be where you are again.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Now I don't get to complain because if I complain, it's gonna look really shallow. Great, Anna. No, I'm kidding.
No, you do get to complain. There's a ton of terrible things happening in the country.
Yeah, no, I'm glad. And by the way, I mean, I know that you saw a little bit of this, but you know, while that was going on, no matter what show I was doing, I was getting messages like either asking if there was an update or just wanting to offer support. Like people were like felt so bad for what you and your family were going through.
Oh, it was terrible, and the outpouring of support was. It was really the only thing that kept me going. Like so many people from work, so many people who watch the show, because it's a very isolating feeling. You feel powerless. You can't visit your loved one. And like the thought that kept going through my head over and over again was, if she doesn't make it, I'm never going to see her again. And it's the world, and so many Americans have experienced that during this pandemic, and like my heart goes out to them. It's really bad. But yeah, she's okay. She's recovering.
Can I mention something really stupid briefly?
Yes.
So when I went to the North Pole and I was on the ship, and I got really like seasick, one of the things that depressed me was because it made me realize that hypothetically space travel might be similar, and if I get sick like this, maybe I wouldn't actually enjoy space travel as much as I thought. This doesn't seem related, but it is. So being stuck in like a small little habitat didn't seem like something that would really bother me, but now clearly it's pretty tough. This pandemic is showing me. So like now, like I'm worried, like what if I actually got the chance to live on Mars? Like it might not actually be that good. I might not be able to actually take it. So that's depressing on an existential sci-fi level.
How would you how would you finance this space travel that you're considering in the future?
I'm not gonna do it. I'm saying like let's say we live long enough that becomes an option. But what if I find that like I don't actually like my body can't take it? That would suck. My hopes are worthless.
I think we might already be there. Like I don't know about you. I'm already at the phase of my life where I wake up with the random aches and pains. And it's just life reminding you that you're not immortal. Like you're going to die one day.
And you do yoga
and by the way, it's going to get worse. Like, yeah, yoga, but like, it doesn't matter. I mean, your body just starts breaking down. That's what it's supposed to do. Like we're gonna age. So yeah, it's not a good feeling. Like okay, so I've been watching, actually I'm done with it and I'll do my best not to do any spoilers. But The Last Dance, I don't know if you're watching that docuseries about Michael Jordan. It's so good.
It was.
It's so good. I love it so much. And look, I'm not gonna lie, a big part of the appeal for me as a millennial who grew up in like the 90s, it's just like the nostalgia and the reminder that like, it doesn't necessarily mean the world was much better back then. I'm not one of these people who's delusional enough to think that. I mean, we had our problems in the 90s, but in the 90s when I was a kid, like I wasn't jaded in any way. I was still a kid. And so like, I remember by watching that docuseries, I remember what it was like to be like this bright-eyed, optimistic, incredibly naive like child who thought like, if I just work hard enough and if I'm like Mike and I give it all I got, then I can get to amazing places in life. And yeah, it didn't work out. But
somewhere little Anna was like watching a TV and she was like, yeah, I do want to be like Mike. I can imagine it.
he did inspire me. I mean, obviously, I'm not a big sports person, and I didn't know his story as in depth as I guess I do now. But watching his devotion and commitment to his craft was inspiring, and it makes you want to do better.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, do enjoy it. I recommend it.
Kind of like Jiro Dreams of Sushi.
Oh, now you're speaking my
documentary.
language. Yeah,
Such a good doc.
I've always said he's the Michael Jordan of sushi. I don't know. They probably do say that. I'm gonna Google it actually. But yeah, good series.
Yeah, very good series. All right. Without further ado, let's talk about what else is in the news today. And I thought we'd start off with a little fun. Let's go ahead and dunk on Charlie Kirk. So. Michigan wants to make it easier for people who want to vote by mail to have the ability to do so. So they sent out vote by mail applications to every voter in the state. Trump was outraged by that and has threatened to cut off federal funds toward Michigan if they go through with making it easy for people to vote. Charlie Kirk has also piled on, and I want to share with you a ridiculous tweet that he put out. So Brett, let's take a look at it. Breaking, Michigan Democrats are turning their state into a vote-by-mail state and mailing voting applications to every citizen in their state, not to every citizen in their state, to every voter, okay? Trump won Michigan by less than 11,000 votes in 2016. Mail-in ballots are a way for Democrats to steal 2020. Retweet if you need voter ID now. So voter ID is a separate issue, but we've talked about why voter ID laws are also meant to suppress voters. For instance, if you're an out-of-state student and you're in Michigan, you are unlikely to have a Michigan driver's license or ID because you're not from Michigan. So it would make it hard for you or prevent you from voting if you're a college student. That's why voter ID laws are purposely promoted by Republicans. But what we're talking about here is Michigan, politicians in Michigan, officials in Michigan, sending applications so you can vote by mail if you want to. It's not even the ballots. Like, they know how unpopular their ideas are. They know that they're complete and utter losers. And all they can really hang their hat on is manipulating the elections, doing voter suppression, intimidating voters by sending these so-called poll watchers to voting locations to intimidate people. So, they don't show up, or if they do show up, maybe they'll even leave if they're harassed enough by these people.
Yeah. His the organization that he's a part of, that's like a college thing, right? It's like focused around colleges.
I don't know. I don't know.
I thought it was. Anyway, it would be ironic if like the whole thing is that you're supposed to represent like conservatives that are aggrieved on campus and you're pushing policies that will stop them from voting. Because the idea is that it's going to stop more liberals, but it is still going to stop conservatives. But you just don't care because it's not about people having access to the vote. It's about your belief that it'll benefit you in the long run. Even though I guess this is pointless to point out, I haven't seen any evidence that more widespread mail-in voting would benefit Democrats. It might, maybe, but there doesn't seem to be strong evidence that that's actually the case. The thing that it definitely will do is lead to more people voting. And that, like, they definitely, they don't like that because pragmatically they think it will hurt them. But I think that at this point, they kind of just don't like it. I think that they are opposed to the idea of everyone being involved. They want it to be, it's a fundamentally elitist way of looking at the world. That's why I don't buy any of the faux right-wing populist stuff. Like, they want it to be the people that they like that are determining things. Anyway, all of this, what I just said, that's more thought than he has put into literally every tweet that he's ever put out. I don't know exactly what the formulation is. I think he's the Meghan McCain of Dave Rubin's, I think. Like, he doesn't think about these things. He tweets stupid formulaic tweets, and he gets 20,000 likes on every single one because there's a bunch of people that have been brainwashed into thinking that he actually represents them. That's all it is.
Yeah, and we don't even know if they're all actual people, right? Like, there's a lot of manipulation with, like, Twitter activity. I don't know, and I don't care. Like, what I do care about, though, is the actual democratic process that our country is supposed to value, right? So I certainly would not want to prevent Trump voters from being able to exercise their voting rights, because I actually genuinely believe in democracy. I believe in the freedoms that the right wing only pretends to value. But behind the scenes, as we know, they don't actually care about voting rights. They don't care about democracy. They don't care about the troops. I mean, Memorial Day is coming up. Trump just put a stop to National Guard workers who have been deployed during the pandemic. So they're 1 day short of qualifying for expanded federal benefits, including increased help so they can afford college, and the ability to retire 3 months earlier than they would if they hadn't done all this extra work in responding to the pandemic. Like, they don't care about the National Guard. They don't care about the troops. They don't care about any of these people. They're just used as political props to help them out when they need the help, politically speaking. That's it.
Yep.
I don't understand like why people don't realize this, though, because like the very groups that they take advantage of and end up getting screwed over still support them. And I don't get it. Anyway, although there was a great story today about how truckers are turning on Trump because he doesn't actually value them and hasn't looked out for them. So some people are feeling it in their finances and they're doing something about it. There's been protests by truckers against Trump.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on to something completely different. And look, I'm not going to lie. This is the story in the rundown today where I procrastinated. I put it off. I just didn't want to read about it. I didn't want to talk about it, but I think it is important to cover. So we're going to do it. So Matt Lauer, who was fired from NBC after facing rape allegations from a former staffer, is now defending himself in an op-ed that was published in Mediaite. Now, I'm going to read relevant excerpts from that op-ed in just a moment, but first I think it's important to give you some background. The person who really jump-started this Me Too movement was Ronan Farrow, and the reporting that he did in regard to Harvey Weinstein and, all of the other men in positions of power who had allegedly abused their power by preying on female colleagues or maybe even female workers who were working under them. Now, Lauer was caught up in some of those allegations, and at the time, he confessed that he had an extramarital affair with one of the NBC staffers. That woman later revealed her identity and shared more details of her story to Ronan Farrow, which was then published in his book, Catch and Kill. Now, this week, there was a big story in the New York Times that was critical of Ronan Farrow's reporting. There was this allegation that Ronan Farrow would just simply publish some of these allegations by women, but would not do the proper fact-checking and look for corroborating information before publishing it. And I think that that is a problem. And look, to be, I guess, fair to Lauer, in his op-ed, you should read the whole thing. There are some instances where he raises some concerns about Ronan Farrow that I think are legitimate, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that Matt Lauer's account is the actual account. There are two sides to this story. So I'm going to give you as many facts as I can, and then you can judge for yourselves. So he writes in his op-ed, on October 9th, 2019, I was falsely accused of rape. The allegation came from Brooke Nevels, the same woman whose complaint resulted in my termination at NBC. It was made public as part of the promotional rollout for a new book by Ronan Farrow. This accusation was one of the worst and most consequential things to ever happen in my life. It was devastating for my family, and outrageously, it was used to sell books. So again, that's Matt Lauer's op-ed. This is his account. Now, he highlights a few instances of allegations that Brooke Nevels made, and how Ronan Farrow didn't follow up or do the proper fact checking in order to corroborate some of these claims. So here's an example. Ronan writes, when Brooke moved to a new job within the company, working as a producer for Peacock Productions, she reported it to one of her new bosses there. She felt they should know in case it became public, and she became a liability. So look, I think Lauer's right here when he states that the right thing to do if you're going to report on this allegation is, hey, who was the boss that Brooke is talking about here? Let's have a conversation with her and see if there's any corroboration. And Lauer alleges that it didn't happen. And Lauer also alleges that he reached out to her former boss to see if this conversation actually took place. And he didn't speak to her former boss personally, but did speak to someone who works with her former boss. And according to Lauer, Brooke never said a single word about this being anything but a consensual affair. She said Brooke in no way conveyed the seriousness of what she now claims. There was never a mention of assault or rape. This superior also stated that Ronan Farrow never reached out to her to confirm the story that referenced her in the book. Ronan writes about a claim Brooke makes involving an alleged encounter in my dressing room, which was a floor above the Today Show studio. She says she came to my dressing room to get some photos, and as she leaned over my desk, she alleges I sexually assaulted her with my hands. He then writes, and this is according to what Ronan Farrow wrote in Catch and Kill, crying, she ran to the new guy she'd started seeing, a producer who was working in the control room that morning, and told him what had happened. So now Lauer is saying, like, okay, well, Ronan Farrow should have spoken to her now ex-boyfriend, who was a producer at NBC at the time. He alleges that Ronan Farrow didn't do that, and that Lauer reached out to him personally and had lengthy conversations with this guy. Look, the problem with that is, okay, so now you're going around talking to ex-boyfriends. Like, you don't know how that relationship ended. Like, there are parts of his op-ed that I'm incredibly uncomfortable with, and I don't know what the truth is. I don't. No one does, right? What I do know, though, is that it is important to have corroborating evidence. As we've seen with the Tara Reade allegations, there was this obsession with corroborating evidence. There was this obsession with talking to people who know Tara Reade to ensure that she actually told them about the allegations at the time that they happened, right? And so I think that that standard makes sense. Now, even though that standard was applied to Tara Reade, it wasn't good enough to persuade people. And then we had to have these long profiles talking to a number of people who wanted to slam Tara Reade for not paying her rent at one time in her life, which has nothing to do with sexual assault allegations. But anyway, I digress. Like, I do think it is important to be careful in what you choose to publish. But for Ronan Farrow's part, he denies these allegations made by Matt Lauer and by the New York Times. So here he is responding to it.
Matt Lauer came out really with guns blazing, responding to you. It made it very clear from his point of view that it was certainly consensual and she was very willing. This really is a he said, she said story, Ronan, at the end of the day, the allegations about Matt Lauer. How do you decide who is telling the truth here?
So I think one of the transformations of recent years is that we've come to understand that actually, I come at this from a legal background, you can corroborate claims of sexual violence. And Brooke Neville's claim has been found credible even by NBC News, which took the step of firing Matt Lauer, and same by me and by the fact checkers working on this. She describes an evening that matches up with a timeline given by others there. There were eyewitnesses to what happened before and after that moment. She described this event consistently over the years. And look, it's telling that NBC News paid her a 7-figure settlement to ensure that she can't talk about what the network knew about.
Yeah, and I really don't like this new, no, but I'm the real victim framing, right? Like, you're a man in a pretty extreme position of power at NBC, like you're a top host, and you shouldn't have relationships with people who work under you. You just shouldn't. It's a really, really bad idea. So at a minimum, that's something that he has confessed to. He's having an extramarital affair with one of his staffers. The rape allegation, I don't know. I don't know what the truth is. All I know is what's being reported by Ronan Farrow and what's now being said by Matt Lauer. But I think that there's like a very clear effort to completely delegitimize what we've managed to do through the Me Too movement. I think the pendulum did swing a little too far in one direction, which was there were people who would just flat out say, believe women, like just believe women. And I never thought that was smart. I think it's important to take women seriously. I think it's important to hear them out and weigh whatever evidence there may be. But now, because some people have weaponized sexual assault allegations, unfortunately, I'm worried that the pendulum is going to swing back in a damaging direction.
Yeah. I don't want to go into all that. With the Matt, how should we know? How can we know? I don't know. I mean, look, it seems very weird to me that he is going around tracking down these individuals and having long conversations with them. That seems weird. And if the case is that Ronan Farrow is just, like picking up any rumor and running with it and not confirming it, that doesn't seem consistent with his history. I mean, if you want to say this specific thing should have been followed up, okay, fine, maybe it should. I'm not familiar with the details to that level, but it doesn't appear that he's just hunting for rumors and then throwing them up and then saying, you guys sort it out. It does seem more considered, more careful, more fact-checked than that.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, I mean, throughout this entire op-ed, Lauer accuses Ronan Farrow of having a bias against NBC. But Matt Lauer, in publishing this op-ed, clearly has a bone to pick with Ronan Farrow. He has his own biases, right? So it's incredible how Lauer makes this big deal about biases and reporting when you're using a conversation with an ex-boyfriend of the woman who's making these accusations against you as evidence of how you didn't do this, right? Are you at all concerned about the possible bias the ex-boyfriend has? Yeah, and so, yeah, I overall agree with you. I don't know. How can you know? But I don't like the characterization put forth by Matt Lauer. And look, NBC News basically did not want to publish Ronan Farrow's reporting on Harvey Weinstein, and they kept saying that he didn't have enough evidence. There wasn't enough corroborating evidence to publish it. But as we know, there was a ton of corroborating evidence, including audio recordings of Harvey Weinstein harassing actresses. So just you need to know the full context. This is the story. I have nothing else to say about it.
Yep.
All right, let's talk about how dumb Trump Jr. is, which is fun. Howard Stern has been feuding with the Trumps. In fact, recently during his SiriusXM show, he talked about how Donald Trump has complete and utter disdain for his own supporters. He hates them. He thinks they're disgusting. And quite honestly, when you consider the way Trump has reacted or responded to coronavirus, which has killed nearly 100,000 Americans at this point, it's not far-fetched to think that Trump hates his own base and that he only wants to manipulate them for his own political gain. But one person who didn't take this well was Donald Trump Jr., who cried and whined about it, his brother Eric as well. And as our wonderful producer Ashwarya says, Howard has decided to go small. Howard Stern went small game hunting here because Donald Trump Jr. likes to do all the ridiculous hunting that he gets involved in. But anyway,
hunting with quotation marks, by the way. It's not hunting.
Right. It's not really
it's executing
hunting
animals.
When you're armed and yeah, exactly. I don't, God, I hate this picture. I don't really want to look at that. But let's go to Donald Trump Jr.'s response to Howard Stern. He says, "It must kill Hollywood Howard to know that more people will see this tweet than listen to his show." God, he's like just a mini-me of Donald Trump. It's amazing. That's what happens when you turn your back on your working class fan base and bend your knee to the same mainstream media you used to mock. He never recovered from losing Art.
Former castmate.
Oh, Artie Quitter. Yeah. Sad. All right. And then the best part was Howard Stern's reaction to that, where he sarcastically states, and I quote, "I can't argue with this kid. I can't argue with him. This kid is such a success. He's such a wit. He's such a genius. He would have made a fortune if he wasn't under his father's thumb. Game over. You can't argue with a genius like that. And it's just such a great point, and it should be thrown in his face constantly. Like, while you're mocking other people and questioning their success, and believe me, I have my issues with Howard Stern, but like in the context of this story, Howard Stern accomplished something in his life. Donald Trump Jr. has done nothing other than, ride on the coattails of his father, but more importantly, his grandfather, who's the only person in that family who ever accomplished anything.
100%. Yeah. You have your problems with Howard Stern. I have Trump-specific problems with Howard Stern. I mean, he helped to sustain Trump in media for a number of years because, hey, he's crude and he's brash and he brags, and so we'll bring him on and we'll have fun and we'll sustain this myth of who he is until he's ready to run for president. Not consciously, obviously, but he did help to popularize Donald Trump for a number of years. So I have my issues with that, obviously. In terms of his commentary about Trump and Trump Jr. and what they think about their fans, it might, I guess, be not particularly effective to continue to go after them. I know that people say that, but it's obviously true that Trump and probably Trump Jr., I don't really care, but Trump has no interest whatsoever in any of his base. Think about what he does when he finally gets away from the stifling confines of the White House. He goes to Mar-a-Lago or he goes golfing. He hangs out with exclusively millionaires and billionaires. That's it. In years, have you ever seen him with a person that makes less than, $1 million a year? I don't know if I've seen that once. They clearly don't. Yeah, he does the rally. He yells at them. Okay. Lots of people do performances for people that they would never spend any time with. Like, I don't understand how Donald Trump fans can rail against the elites who are out of touch and don't understand them and all of that, the limousines and the lattes and all of that stuff. And Donald Trump gilds everything around him. Everything's golden. I don't understand that and how they can imagine that guy would ever have a beer with them.
Yeah, I mean, this is a story that you and I actually covered together years ago. It was before Trump even announced he was going to run for president. There was a story about how he did not believe that golf should be like something that poor people can play. You play golf. Yeah, like it should be reserved for the wealthy. He said that. And by the way, he preys on the poor all the time. I mean, think about what Trump University was all about. He had to pay a giant settlement, tens of millions of dollars, because he was found guilty of basically committing fraud with Trump University. He was preying on people who wanted to better their lives. And he really offered them nothing for the money that they paid for this like fake university. He's just a terrible person. And yeah, you're right. I mean, it's so clear, and it always blows my mind that some people don't realize it. But I mean, all you can do is just try to get these stories out and make sure that people who want to be informed get a chance to see it. But I think like the broader issue is that people are choosing what their own realities are. Like they reject data, they reject science, they reject evidence, they reject like video evidence of the very person they support giving them a giant middle finger. And I don't know how you combat that. Like, how do you then persuade people who think that way?
Yeah. I know, by the way, I found that statement about golf and how it should stay elitist and they should aspire to someday be able to play it, to afford to play it. Like that they should have a 20-year plan to someday be able to play a round. It's amazingly elitist. Like, you think John Kerry's ever said anything like that? My God, he really has pulled one over on these people.
Can you imagine having a 20-year plan to be able to play golf? Like that's like the last thing I would do.
Yeah, and by the way, you can like a politician and have a semi-accurate, grounded in reality view of who they are and how they relate to you. I supported Bernie Sanders. I don't think Bernie Sanders wants to play board games with me. Like, I don't. Just because I support his policies doesn't mean he just wants to hang out with me or whatever. He probably doesn't want to do that. Why can't... And that's the difference between supporting a politician and signing on to a cult of personality. This belief that there's some sort of personal attachment to a person who wants absolutely nothing to do with you.
I can tell you with certainty that Bernie does not want to have dinner with you. Like, the thing that I actually really like about Bernie is, yeah, like he's just a no. Like, anyway, I don't want to talk about Bernie. It makes me sad. He's like a grumpy guy. He is a grumpy guy, and I kind of love that about him.
Yeah, he should be grumpy. He's been paying attention to American politics for decades. You put anyone in a bad mood.
Grumpy? Yeah, seriously. Anyway, make sure everyone checks out John Idarolo's show every morning, The Damage Report. And yeah, and that's it. That's all I got for you guys. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.